Good evening, and welcome to the June 14th meeting of the Planning Policy Commission. Tonight we have 3 items on the agenda, all of which are extremely important for our city that makes us different from all the other cities. But first, I would like to take a second to do a shout out to the mayor. Had a meeting with the mayor today. It was awesome. Her energy of how she understands everything that we've been working on and what the future of the city is. I'm really excited, and that energy is just contagious. So I'm really glad, and I appreciate the work she's done. So I wanted to thank her for that, the time that she gave us this morning. So thank you. As always, we have approval of the minutes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of May 24th, 2018.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The meeting on the 24th was a little strange. The first part was rules and regulations on how to be a good commissioner, and the second part was a tour of Old Town, so we kind of got a good idea of what was going on, and I'd kind of like to get some input of what you thought and what you thought you learned in the process. We had a great driver and commentary during the whole process. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to maybe bring up of value of going out and actually seeing what was going on? Okay, nobody's saying something, so I will. I thought it was great. I've lived in the city since 1979, and I drive around all those places, and you drive and you don't pay attention to how it's going to be in the future, what should happen. And so going through, I think we all had a better idea of just looking at, well, should this be a 2-story building or a 3-story building, and how it all works together. So I thought it was a great opportunity, and I think that driving again through the city, I'm going to take a little bit more notice of where we are and how we can put it together, since we're going to be, looking at issues that affect Old Town. So anyway, so we're going to go off to the first thing on the agenda is Kristen is going to give us an introduction on what's happening with Gilman Boulevard visioning.
Yeah, so I just wanted to give you a heads up that this project is starting. Eventually, it's going to come to you. I don't know at this point if it'll be a recommendation or informational, but it will be coming back to you. So we're working on a Gilman visioning project, and we're doing this because right now Gilman is not hugely bike or pedestrian friendly. It has narrow sidewalks in places and no bike lanes in places. They're a little spotty. Has a high number of vehicle collisions on this street, in part because of the turn lanes and the queue spaces. There's no standard cross-section here, so when developers come in, staff doesn't know how to tell developers where to build their buildings, where the front of their line's going to be, and the right-of-way varies a lot. It goes from 85 feet to 120 feet in places, and there are places that have teeth in it. So there needs to be a vision so people know what to expect. So our goals are to fix that. We'll improve safety, we'll improve the landscaping, we'll hopefully bring in some parks into the area and create a signature street with character and provide predictability for both staff and developers. Currently, there's an online survey on our website. It's Issaquah. If you go to issaquah.gov/Gilman, there's a survey, and I have done it, and it's really cool. It's you actually get to move a map around and put dots on there and write comments in there. It's a really good interactive survey that's a little different than the others. And it runs through July 13th. On July 11th, there's a community open house where we will let people know about the goals for Gilman, the existing corridor assets that should be protected or enhanced. We'll let people know what we know so far from the survey and talk about what we want, the vision, how this whole process is going to work. So next, there will be a document. We're going to have a document for the community's vision for this and strategize how to actually implement that vision. And they will present the draft vision at the Economic Vitality Commission, Planning Policy Commission, and Park Board in October and November. I think ours will be in October. We'll present this vision to council in January, and then we'll start developing the corridor concept after that. And I think that's it. It was intended to be quick, but do you all have any questions about it? We're really excited to finally have a vision and some predictability here, and perhaps some more greenery and pedestrian friendliness. It's hopefully going to be a great thing.
I do have a question. Is that also going to include Northeast Gilman Boulevard?
East of Front Street, no. It's
Okay.
going to go from SR 900 to Front Street. There's been talk about it, but not yet. Did I not say SR 900? Oh, it includes SR, well, it goes, yeah, okay.
So we'll find out all the details.
Yes, you will find out all the details, so do participate in the survey. It is a good one. July 11th, there's the open house, and then the Public Works is going to come back here in October to present everything that they have found so far and where we are.
Do you have the little cards?
Oh, I do. I have some cards here for any public or PPC who wants it that tells you a little bit more about it. I'll leave them on the table. Does anybody in PPC want them?
Just leave them on the table.
I'll leave them on the table up here.
Okay.
Okay? Any other questions? Okay,
We're excited.
excellent. Me too.
That was fast.
It
and
was fast.
The next thing is a presentation by Jennifer Fink, the park planner, about the park strategic plan that has been looked at for a long time and
Yes, it has,
by a lot of people and a lot of input, and so
for sure.
give us some update, please.
Sounds great. Well, thank you. I'm Jennifer Fink, Park Planner. Couldn't be more thrilled to be here tonight to share with you the Park Strategic Plan. We have been working on this for quite some time. Let me get this. There we go. For tonight's presentation, I'm just going to go through a real quick introduction of the strategic plan. Tonight's focus isn't really to dive deep in it. It's already been through the Parks Board, and they've made their recommendation to council. We're really here tonight for public hearing and discussion on the goals and policies portion of it. But to give you a little background and context for further discussion on the goals and policies, I'm going to likely walk through very quickly the plan's development and kind of what is in there as far as structure, the type of information, and the public engagement that we went through to then inform the goals and policies. So the plan, we started working on this back in early last year. So we've been at this for about over a year and a half now. And we have month to month been to the Park Board. They've acted as a steering committee for the entire project. We've done several phases of public engagement, which I'll get into in just a little bit. We did our joint work on the green necklace, and the planning process was very intentional, and this was an extensive process that really created the foundation for all of the work that's within the park strategic plan. As we enter into the final stages of the plan's adoption, this is coming to you, as I mentioned, with the Parks Board recommendation, which was made on May 17th. And this also went to Services and Safety Committee earlier this week with referral to Council in July. So the public engagement, we did two big phases. The first phase was very aspirational, high level. How are things working for you? What are your hopes and dreams? How are we doing? What do you want to see within the system? We did public meetings, online survey, and then also phase two, we did an additional public engagement, but it was a little more in depth. And this assisted us in the online survey with identifying some strategies, some priorities, and also helped assist with themes that came out of the public engagement, which was also going to be seen in the goals and policies as well, and the strategic projects. We also kind of did a third public engagement as part of it. Once we had a draft document, we did have it online for a 4-week period, received some public comment. We shifted a few pages. No substantial changes were really made to it. No changes were made to the goals and policies during that time, so there's been no change from the Park Board's recommendation or public input to date. So out of the public engagement, 5 themes really emerged. and they're placemaking, connectivity, innovative action, and a vital environment. And these themes help shape some of the changes that we're going to talk about in the goals and policies. And almost every strategic project has at least 2 of these themes. In a summary chart, the main theme is highlighted. Some projects have multiple themes that they attribute to. We also, from those themes and the public engagement, we came up with a whole bunch of strategic projects. This is some of the work that also melds with the Green Necklace work. 51 of these are spread out geographically throughout the city. We also had 4 operational projects that came out of it that are not represented on here because they're not really site-specific. And those were a recreation facilities strategic plan to initiate an urban forest green Issaquah program, improve park signage, trail wayfinding, and also to initiate a neighborhood grant program.
Jennifer?
Yeah,
Is this a good time to ask questions?
you can, sure.
So I'm looking over at Tiger Mountain. You've got 2 circles. I'm not exactly sure what they are. I can't read from them. The orange area, the vast orange area on the west side, northwest side of Tiger, and then there's a circle with a red
Ring,
ring around it.
those are trailheads.
Okay, so are we creating new trailheads there?
Expanding existing or creating new connection points, yeah. In the final plan, the red ring isn't there. That was a,
Okay. What are those trails defined, or is this not the right place to discuss that?
we can talk about that. Hang on a second. Let me grab my handy dandy cheat sheet list that has the list of all the projects. And I can tell you what those are specifically, if I can find them. So 28 is the East Sunset Trailhead, which is right there.
Yep.
So that's East Sunset Trailhead, and then 27 is Park, yeah, Southeast Second, or South Second and PSC Trailhead, and the kind of the Rainier Trail access point here.
What is the time frame for those, that expansion?
I have to look in the strategic projects, all the strategic projects in the summary chart on page 73 of the Park Strategic Plan.
I
Groups them.
specifically ask because I'm curious how that impacts the homeless encampment that's there. Is Parks Department going to be working to relocate it as they're going to be moving that?
Yeah, if you know of a camp that we need to address, we can certainly,
I think that's at High Point on 29,
Yeah, I don't think that's at that spot.
which would be, I think, 29.
You think it's at 29 and then 28?
Yeah, neither of those are High Point.
Does the Parks Department have any plan to deal with the homeless encampments at 29?
yeah, we do go out and deal with them. We have protocol that we follow in doing so. So I can certainly make note of it and make sure our department knows about them.
They are, yep, the homeless encampment is still currently at 29 there.
Do you
So
know
if there's-
specifically where out there? Because it's very
Yeah,
large.
so
area.
if you just go to the left of the trailhead, when you're at what is now marked at 29, there you'll follow the trail of needles and you'll be able to find.
29, this is 29
And I
here.
think,
Yeah.
I think that's right. Is 29 High Point or is 29?
High Point's actually out here.
that's-
Oh, okay, then that's
it's
not,
out on- yeah,
okay,
and
so I was going to say, there's going to be issues with trail expansion if you're dealing
Yeah,
with that, so that's a whole
You're
separate
talking
area
about the
then.
designated.
That's King County area, so,
okay.
You're talking about the designated tent city.
no, it's not.
Oh, it's not?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, King County, you can report them to them, and they have protocol as well to follow up.
Sure,
on
no, I
those.
want to know what the role of, less about reporting and more about the role of how Parks Department was working with that community, less of a reporting issue, so.
Okay.
And, sorry, so my
Yeah.
last question is, what is the orange highlighted area? The 20, is it 29?
This here,
Yeah.
that is all public open space. It's part of Tradition Plateau.
Okay. So we're going to be building new trails in that area, or that's just,
Potentially, there's maybe some enhanced recreation out there. We work closely, just the other night, took to council an agreement for interlocal with Department of Natural Resources for co-management of that trailhead. So there's hopes by both parties to expand use, increase recreational activities, because it's one of the more heavily used trailheads in the state.
thank you.
Uh-huh. So one of the major projects and one of the anchors that came out of the strategic plan was the Creek Corridor. This is an anchor project that comes from Squack Valley Park to the south and can connect us all the way to Lake Sammamish State Park. It includes the Rainier Trail, so it kind of would ebb and flow with its connection to existing neighborhoods, connections to Old Town. It's also represented in the Green Necklace work that we did. You can see this is what we currently own as Parks Open Space. We've made some very great connections over time. We've been acquiring properties up and down Issaquah Creek for quite some time. There's a lot more work that needs to be done as far as how that would get laid out. But one of the projects is that anchor corridor connecting the city, connecting neighborhoods, connecting with the Mountains to Sound Greenway Trail, which was also another identified corridor, and also fed into the Green Necklace work, which we jointly did. As you may recall, we earlier this year did a joint effort on that. One of the great exciting things was when we were working together on this, everyone instantly forgot about the boundaries of central Issaquah and wanted to connect to the greater ring, the natural open space, the hillside areas, which is great because that's exactly what the Parks Plan is doing, Park Strategic Plan. The Green Necklace, addresses system-wide mobility for non-motorized connections. And this was also part of the Central Issaquah visions, and this work really bridges the Park Strategic Plan with Central Issaquah vision work. And the strategic projects that were identified in the Green Necklace work also correlate with the strategic projects, the numbering and descriptions for the Park Strategic Plan. So the Parks strategic projects went through a filtration system of sorts, or toolkit, and we broke them into kind of 3 buckets. Here you can see they're arranged by their priorities. The main priorities have a bold ring on them, but we have near-term, mid-term, and long-term projects. These buckets will help inform how the visionary document, strategic plan, gets implemented through our CIP and actionable into eventual projects and funded.
How did we identify the short-term, medium, and long-term?
So we went through, let's see here. There was a toolkit, a planning tool, and it is on starts on page 92. And there's lists that we run projects through, score them, see if there's 2 really. There's the first one, see if a project's suitable. If you get a new shiny idea that you want to focus, 10 days after the park plan's adopted, we'd run it through this filtration system per se and see if it's even a viable project. If it is, then it would go through the same scoring that the other projects did, and they all kind of competed against each other, and we separated them out into buckets. There was a phase 2 checklist, which I don't have the image on, but it's on page 90, starts on page 95, the description, but 96, 97. And so all the projects went through that, and then were just kind of rated within each other. They naturally fell into 3 buckets. Those will vary over time, and there's going to be near-term and long-term aspects to some of those projects, which were also highlighted as well. the strategic plan is really meant to be a very dynamic and ever-changing document. We really don't want it to be sitting on the shelf, and we hope that it gets changed in the future as we work through it and keep modifying it, and it becomes a working tool for the Parks Department.
You know, a note about that, I recognize that the state mandates that you update it every 6 years, but I'm curious how much discussion you guys had about updating it more frequently. 6 years is a long time to kind of set it on the shelf, and even doing an interim 3-year, I feel like would really help to keep this document a little more relevant.
I agree. We actually would start the process, though, when we apply to RCO, it's good for a 6-year period of time.
Right.
Though we usually start that process at year 4. Through council discussions earlier this week, they had made a recommendation to come back on a yearly basis and at least do a report out as to how we're doing, part of our measurings of success,
Great.
kind of check in.
Thank you, that's great.
So that would be like coming back every year with a TIP where we change and
No, we have a 2-year adopted CIP process, but it would be, how are we doing on our projects? Where are we? How's the plan working for us?
Right.
Yeah.
but it would be the same kind of process. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see here. So strategic projects, so implementation. Here's just kind of a nice graphic that really talks how the strategic plan is going to work. It's kind of the big picture idea, the 30,000-foot elevation, which is going to, help feed the comp plan, our 6-year capital or 5-year capital improvement. This was outdated. 5-year, help identify funding strategies and also inform other city plans, which also helps us then set our annual operating and capital budgets, which then gets us into the master planning process for each of the specific strategic projects, which then at each project level, we go out and engage the public. And then we have our outcomes, which are the final projects.
Why did you delay identifying the funding till 2020, 2021? An implementation plan for funding the process. Why did you delay it?
To 2021?
Yeah.
Well, that's what our CIP is right now, to the year 21. As we update that, that'll keep getting pushed out. The near-term projects are intended to be, like year 1 through 6. The whole plan is intended to be a 20-year document. Of course, that, can change, but that's really what it's intended to be.
It's just hard to plan and decide which projects get first dibs if there's no funding mechanism for them. So I was just wondering why.
So in the plan, we mentioned funding. That's really up to council, as far as the discussions they want to have on some of those. We have a lot of various options available to parks for funding them, whether we go bonds and capital improvement projects, operating, we do grants, there's levy funds, there's all sorts of options available. Many projects are have multiple funding mechanisms. So we'll, as we go through this next update of the CIP for next year, right now we're in a mid-year, so next year when we update it, we'll be taking a much harder look at the funding of all of these specific projects.
I don't know if it makes sense in this type of a plan or whether it makes more sense in a yearly update, but it would be really nice to know which of these projects have funding already associated with them and what percentage funded they already are, so that we can get a sense of, okay, out of all of the near-term projects, here are the areas that are at threat of not happening.
Yep. Well, what we did, as you can see on here, where's my mouse? This is kind of a general funding, kind of the Yelp version. How many dollar signs is it going to take you to get that project done? And then as we go through the CIP process, we'll start allocating those specific funding sources. We specifically did not get detailed in the funding on this. In future updates, if we were to go to a performance-based LOS and some other things, we'll probably get into that as this plan matures and grows and as future updates. But for this first version, we just didn't really
Yeah, and I think that makes
bandwidth to
sense
go
for
there.
a larger 6-year plan. It just does leave questions there, and I think it's appropriate to understand when those questions are going to be answered.
Yeah.
Especially when we start thinking about acquiring land along the creek and really
Mm-hmm.
trying to get vital parcels to really expand what our options are
Mm-hmm.
is kind of, time sensitive. And so I think understanding where we're at on that really helps the public to better understand where we're at and where we need to go.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that, this is a good start, but it kind of lacked a little bit of those details to kind of figure out what really needs to happen and what does success really look like. So we appreciate you having that kind of mindset for future work.
We agree. So with that, I think we'll probably jump into the goals and policies. Let's see. Are those pulled up? No. Do you know where I can find them?
Oh, for the packet. Are you looking for the packet?
Huh?
You looking for the packet?
Yeah, that would work.
Packet, it's just online.
While
Oh, okay.
she's doing that, I forgot to ask you in the beginning, before we started the meeting, if we could move the election to the end of the meeting instead of where it is. I want to make sure that the audience has enough time to do their,
Yep.
so if you don't have any problem with that, then we'll change that.
Agreed.
Yeah, you're welcome. Will that work?
Yeah.
Okay. It's,
That'll work,
okay.
because there was a link to the.
Okay. Let's graduate. Here we go. Well, real close.
Sorry?
I guess we're doing this. Which one? And then pick
Goals and policies.
This one?
Probably the comparison.
this one. This one.
Yeah.
There you go. And then you can always flip back and forth.
So the goals and policies within the park strategic plan came from the 2015 comprehensive plan park element update. They were modified according to the feedback we received from the public, the goals, the aspirations, some of the strategies, the themes. And tonight I really just wanted to touch on some of the major ones that I felt were the newest that really related to the work that was done, the new input that was received. Many of the themes you can see were just rearranged or moved a lot of information or deleted irrelevant and put in some updated information, but not too much was really rearranged through that. But the new policies really are directly related to the work that was done. And probably the first one I would like to touch base on is policy A1 here, which is reinvestment. When we went out to the public, it was really important for them that we heard that we take care of what we have or we improve what it is we have. And so that that need for reinvestment within our park spaces was really important to them. So we felt that was a good addition to the policies. The next one I want to touch on is really A14, which is placemaking. Again, this was one of the themes, and this came directly out of the work. People wanted a sense of place when they go experience a park that makes it unique, that this is their space, you know, that they want to hang in and linger, that they frequent and feel at home. So providing a sense of placemaking was really important to the public, and we felt being a theme, we really needed to have a policy to address it. The next two, we also had the theme connectivity. A connected trail experience, whether you live on the valley floor or you live on a hillside, being able to get from A to B via different routes right-of-way was really important, and using multiple modes to do it. So providing a connected trail experience throughout the city, that's through Central Issaquah and Issaquah Highlands, connecting down, and I think you see that in some of the strategic projects, that we're really expanding those connection pieces. And also the trailheads. While we spoke a lot about trails, we never specifically had a policy addressing trailheads and the need for the improvement there. We get too many cars parking on the side, and it's not safe. There's trailheads that really need to be expanded and are worth investing in for access, because some are in really strategic locations. And, sorry, one got out of order here. The next one is also the policy A23, which is create a focused vision for the Creek Corridor. This was being our anchor project. Felt it was, again, important to have a policy that directly spoke to that, connecting people to the public park spaces and interacting with the different city districts, neighborhoods. As I said, it would really ebb and flow through the city and connecting with Central Issaquah, also the Mountains to Sound Trail, and so it'd be serve as our primary feature within our park system.
So since that policy talks about creating a vision and a strategy, is there a sense of when that is going to be worked on as a specific part?
Not yet, but that's additional work coming out of this strategic plan is determining that.
Okay.
Yeah. The next policies I would like to move you to, most of these were just some rearrangement. Hang on here. And these were kept in a similar format as far as layout to the 2015 for consistency purposes. And we understand as the plan matures over time and we take future updates to it, that they could take a different form as well.
So there on C1.1, I was curious about the addition of no changes of use within park shall occur without parks coordination or assessments of impact and any mitigated measures completed. It's a new phrasing I was hoping you could expand on a little bit. Have you found that parks has been cut out of the process regularly?
No, we just want to ensure that we are at the table with those processes and, making sure that city interests for prioritization and for some of these connections are there, and that we are at the table to help negotiate.
Have you not been? I guess I was a little surprised. It seemed a little bit of an
No,
odd-
it was important when we, both to the park board and through the public, that we heard that they want to make sure we're there with those connections. So, which is why it was included.
Do you think that this addition helps to cement that better?
I think it does. I think by not having it, it loses a little teeth. By having it, I think, it assures us a place at the table, ensures our involvement, especially as Issaquah grows and changes. Things can no longer happen in isolation. Everything really is a codependent work, Gilman, any development. So it's really just ensuring that we're there. Let me page down. Sorry if I make you dizzy here. There's not a lot of change that happened through here, so please forgive me. Next
I like
policy.
the way you separated. It's easier to understand and to focus, so I think you did a good job with taking a long sentence and dividing it up and seeing if there was more specifics to be done.
Yeah, and a few policies that were a little verbose, we trimmed down a little. Hang on here. The next policy I wanted to bring your attention to that we added was this about the impact fees and how they should be used. There's, I think there was some confusion amongst some people, park board members even, as to how impact fees get used and why we use them. So this is more of a clarifying, this is state law as to why we charge impact fees, but people didn't really know. And so I think it was important for us just to call it out and really identify it for them as to why we do that. Because, you know, we use them for a lot of our parks developments, and it's an important feature, you know, that growth pays for growth.
What is the percentage?
You know, I would have to go back and look. It really varies upon the rate of development. You know, we can go periods of time where we're not generating a lot, and then there's times where we get a lot. So it can really vary over the years. But I don't have those figures with me right now. But I can get them to you.
And how often is that readdressed? How often are you reassessing what those fees are?
So the impact fees, we actually delayed a recent update of the impact fees for the parks because we were going through the strategic planning process. We knew they were changed. However, the last rate study was done in 2015, and it is updated annually with the index. So
So you don't specifically change the impact, charge a percentage of the, or impact fees. It's a city associated, determined.
yes, yeah.
I wanted to make that clear because it wasn't clear.
So that one, and then F3 was the other one I wanted to be sure to bring to your attention. Is going to eventually a performance-based level of service, which would take into consideration quality of our park spaces. You know, that was one thing we heard from the public during our engagement. We have all these great spaces, but they're lacking in some quality. So being able to help look at our park spaces with that third dimension would really help. It would take some additional work. It's future work that we would like to go, you know, strive towards. But I think it was more what the public is asking for from our park system, that we really, you know, look at how it's being funded, the quality of the improvements that are there. And that goes back to one of the first themes or policies I spoke of, which was let's take care of and reinvest in what we have. And it's adding that third dimension in that equation.
So I think this level of service idea is fantastic. I would also encourage that be part of the metrics that you bring back annually. I'm wondering what stands in the way of getting that done? Is it just time and effort that the park board and Parks Department needs to put together on this, or are there other pieces?
There's other pieces. It also goes to our facilities and asset management, getting some of that updated. So there's been some initial steps we've needed to take to really jump into this body of work.
Okay. I think
But
it's
we wanna get
fantastic
there.
to go toward that direction, but also think about how do we get there and what's holding us back.
Is there a time frame on when implementation will be
You know, I
happening?
haven't heard yet, but hopefully sooner than later is our goal.
So when you do your presentation at every year, your yearly update, do you plan on coming back to PPC to update us, or are you updating the city?
That was
And-
just a council request at services on Tuesday. So, but we could always come back and let you know
Well, no,
how park
I
plan's
just wanted
doing.
to be clear, because I
Yeah.
know that some of the commissioners are saying when you bring it back to us, but I wasn't clear that you were actually going to do that. Those updates will go to city council or
Yeah. It was a
manager
council.
or whoever you services.
Yeah. But we're always welcome to come visit if you want us to.
We'd love to have you back.
Okay.
We really like parks, so.
Yeah. So with that, if you have any other questions about the policies, I'm happy to ask.
So if you can hold your questions till after the public hearing, because you always hear things in the public hearing that you might want to add to that. So if that's okay with you guys?
That's fine.
So with that, I'd like to, thank you, open the public hearing on 2018 Parks Strategic Plan, and only that. at 7:13 and ask if anybody would like to speak to the parks plan. Is anybody signed up? So with that,
I didn't know you were supposed to sign up.
well, that's okay. If you want to be first, and then we'll go you and you, okay? Please come to the podium, state your name and your address, and give us your thoughts.
I'm Tom Anderson, 837 Front Street South. I live south end of town there, fairly close to the 2nd Avenue intersection with the Rainier Trail and the little trailhead there that is often called the High School Trail. And well, that trailhead is not signed or anything, and it's it just struck me as I was reading through the policy. I discovered in policy C2.4 on signage, the usage of signage shall be limited in order to preserve the visual integrity and natural character of all the parks, et cetera. Well, maybe that's why there's not a sign there. It's in violation of that clause of the policy. Well, if it is, then the policy should be changed. Well, maybe it's not that. Maybe there are other reasons. But if I could have a nickel for every time that somebody asked me, is this the way to Poo-Poo Point? Or can I get to Lake Tradition this way? Or whatever, I could retire. But alas, I must keep my nose to the grindstone because I don't have those nickels. So, you know, I applaud the spirit of what's being described here, but this is a very good example of total failure to really do something with that trailhead. It's a very popular trailhead. Maybe the strategy is to keep it a secret, but I'm sorry to tell you, it's the secret is out. And there's lots of people who use that trailhead, and there's lots of people who get lost because they can't find their way. So if there is any conflict between this signage policy and what's going on there, well, then let's straighten that out or whatever. Maybe there's some other reason why there can't be a sign there, I don't know, but it shouldn't require very many years of study to figure out how to put a sign there, is my feeling. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
What policy were you just quoting?
C2.4, signage.
2.4. All right, thank you.
And specifically, the statement about the use of signage shall be limited in order to blah, blah, et cetera. So if that is a reason why there's no sign at a trailhead, then, well, let's rethink that policy. You know, the city likes to call itself Trailhead City. And here's a popular trailhead that has no clue that it's a trailhead. Well, it gets used, and there's some problems of the usage there and all. But this is a kind of it is not putting our best foot forward in terms of the people who are using that trailhead. I guess I see this problem not only from the hikers that are on that trail wandering around and going the wrong way and coming out over by the gun club instead of where they thought they had their car, et cetera, but also when people ask me about, oh, you know, I want to go to Poo-Poo Point, but that Cherico Trail is so busy. What do you recommend, Tom? And I say, oh, well, there's a better way to get there. Let's not make the problem at Cherico worse. Let's make it better and park in town, park at the high school or something. But I have there's a challenge in me even communicating with these people about where to park and where to go because there's no signs. It would be helpful if there were some signs. Thank you.
So the main reason for public hearing is to get comments from the public who are actually out in the hinterland of Issaquah. So thank you for your comments. I think Jennifer will look at that a little bit more closely. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
Hi, Steve Pereira, Old Town, about 10 years. So first of all, thanks for all of you serving. And I think I see a new face up there, so thank you for public service and being involved. It's a chance for me to say thank you, and also a chance to recognize that service. It's also a chance for you to say, to to take it to heart are the things that you're being presented with, the best things in the best interest, or how we can do it better, not maybe just accepting what comes before you, but kind of take a critical eye and what can be improved or what can be made better or what falls short. So thank you for taking that responsibility seriously. So no specific item I want to talk about. It has been an effort. I think in some areas I would like to see more concrete mechanisms on how these things are going to happen, and maybe a direct link between a parks plan and maybe city council saying we're going to spend X amount of money or X percentage of the budget doing implementing this green necklace to make sure it happens, because otherwise it's just going to be an aspirational goal and we're going to put it up there and it's not going to necessarily pan out as other things get given larger commitments. I also think the scope should be larger than just this idea of green necklace, but I think it should apply to having a group, or whether it's a Parks Commission, look at something larger and look at the tree canopy overall, look at green space, urban forests retention, not just from a planned destination area, but maintaining the green throughout the Issaquah area. Thank you.
Ms. Wall?
I'm Janet Wall, and I live at 22740 Southeast 56th Street in the Overdale Park area. And my main passion is habitat restoration. I'm a retired fishery biologist. I must admit that I have been so busy, I haven't had too much chance to look at or find the strategic plan until this afternoon. I quickly went through the main points of it. I didn't see much mention about wildlife or even our iconic salmon on considerations on what the parks should be doing. And that bothers me. I have spent numerous times talking about the importance of wildlife corridors. One of the main reasons that I lived in Seattle for many years while I was working. But one of the main reasons I moved to this area was I was tired of just seeing English sparrows and starlings at my bird feeder. And I do enjoy seeing a much greater variety and seeing deer, and I just talked to some neighbor children, and they were just ecstatic because they just recently saw a bobcat. And we're very excited about that. And I think it's important to recognize the needs of wildlife in an increasingly urban area, that we need to preserve our wildlife corridors so that they can move from area to area that they need to get to, and to not isolate the Issaquah Alps from one another. I do, in general, agree with most of the major points and the things, but as other people have pointed out, there's kind of a lack of detail, and I'm also evaluating what has been happening. I spend a fair amount of time volunteering for Bellevue because there isn't a good volunteer program in Issaquah. Right now, and for years, they finally got a volunteer coordinator, but they're only dealing with large groups. So I think, there are other people that are interested in doing projects, and they'd like to work with other people, but it's not, I go out and see something and I go ahead and do it. But it's, would help if there was a little more coordination. There was no mention of restoring the creek buffer for salmon and other wildlife. I just walked today on the west side of the creek. I mean, they were just considering the east side of the creek. And the west side of the creek, it had been restored before. I had worked on, there were a number of organizations that had worked on that restoration on the west side of the creek from Newport Way to the south. And it'd been a couple of years since I'd been there, and I was dismayed that had been no maintenance, and so it's 99% blackberries and ivy climbing up the trees. Those trees aren't going to last long, and they provide shade for the salmon. So and I know that there was a restoration that the Parks Department did in the Ingy, I can't remember the name of the park, and it wasn't maintained, and so you can barely find it anymore. So that's putting a lot of hard work for no lasting benefit. So anyway, yeah, I could certainly use some help. I every year, or for the last about 4 years, I've been working on removing tansy ragwort from the Issaquah area because it was in danger of going completely out of control. And last year, finally, the Highlands land manager, after I had a noxious weed program person talk to them about the need to deal with the issue, and they actually did. And so there's some hope that we can control the tansy ragwort, but I've got over 50 sites that I have to check and remove tansy ragwort. And carrying those heavy bags of tansy is a real chore. So I could use help, but I've asked for it and asked for it. I've asked for help with having inspector check construction areas, because it's difficult for me to get into a construction area. I don't want to be contending with trucks and construction equipment. So I thought, it would make sense to have the site inspectors that go in there and check for various other erosion, other issues. Why not have them recognize what tansy ragwort and some of the other Class B noxious weeds that we have in our area and require that they be removed? But no, after I tried all that, no dice. So what I had to do was go in on a weekend, and there was tansy right, in plain sight, and nobody had done anything. So I had to do it on weekends. So there are a lot of things that could be easily changed that would help a lot in making things much better environment and much for both wildlife and more enjoyable for people. So the trail that I walked on the west side of Issaquah Creek, once again, the signage issue, many people don't know about it. And it's not clear whether that's a public trail or not. So that's something that should be clarified. And I like that policy D1.4 speaks about utilizing citizen involvement, stewarding and maintaining the City of Issaquah's park system. But as I say, I haven't really found that they're really utilizing that. And I hope that changes.
And I've seen Jennifer write down most of your comments, so I think that something will happen along those lines. It would be nice to have like 400 or 500 more of you that are out there working on the making, things better.
We're out
So
there.
hopefully, it'd be nice to try to find some group that is interested in doing that with the ability of the city to allow them to do it. I know that it takes insurance and, you have to have all these safeguards
Liability
in order to
and-
let
Yes.
people do that, but thank you. And if you have any other comments, let Jennifer know. You'll see it, like the last gentleman, you're the one out there looking at these things, and I think it's important. I know that you've spent a long time working in the city on commissions, on special projects, so they take your ideas seriously. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Connie, welcome.
So Connie Marsh, I live on Squawk. There actually are groups with the insurance, but we've never gotten much help from the Parks Department, so we're all used up, so we've stopped. I spent 15 years weeding, and without support, you can't do it for more than 15 years, and we don't have it and haven't for a long time. But I'm here to talk about the policies. Oh, I guess I can answer the signage issue. We do have sorry, Jennifer. My father-in-law gave the city a grant maybe 12 years ago. Issaquah Alps a grant 12 years ago for signage on Park Point. So finally, the signs got ordered this spring, to be put into place for the Park Point trails as a potential template for signage. It only took 12 years, but now they're being manufactured and hopefully will be installed shortly. It's a good thing we're patient. So I'm hoping that you all got the matrix that I also spent many hours working on, because looking at the goals and policies made me a little crazy. They were mixed up, redundant, and there was implementation mixed in with things that I would be considered to be visions, goals, and policies. And so in order to unscramble my brain, I tried separating them out. And the highlights of that for me was that we actually have quite a bit on parks in general. But on some of the topics that you have heard today, which would be trails, recreation, which you haven't heard but council talked about, and open space, we basically don't have a vision and incredibly limited goals and policies for these things that are the core of our park system. And I think that each of those strong areas needs their own independent vision, sort of like having a corporation that has their corporate vision, but you have departments that need guidance so that they know what they're doing to satisfy the whole vision. Your goals and policies don't have that. All you have is sort of the top vision. And so right now, you're thinking, wow, we can't write this whole thing tonight. And so my solution to that is you would create a work item to rewrite this year and let this pass through as a temporary, because I think it is a heavy lift. I don't think this will get us even close to what we want in the comprehensive plan. So Parks Department might be having a seizure right now. I'm not looking, she's there out of the corner of my eye, but I did warn them in advance that these were my concerns, and they don't particularly feel like doing the work right now, but maybe they could be persuaded to do the work in the next 6 months so that we get it right, as compared to just like slapping her together. Thanks.
Would anybody else like to make a comment about the parks plan? Seeing nobody. I'm going to close the public hearing at 7:32 and open it up for discussion. So Joy, what would you like?
I very much agree with Connie's comments in that when I was reading the document, I found it to be very high-level vision. I appreciated the being able to see the comparison of where we were in 2015 and where we are now. But like some of my questions tonight of kind of, well, do we have a plan of when this is going to be happening? There's no timetable whatsoever. So I would like this document to evolve past where it is and quickly. So whether that means passing it along with kind of these conditions, I'm a fan of, because I think that this document is, again, a nice start, but I felt that it was a little incomplete. But I don't know that, again, when I was reading it, that I felt that, Connie went through, I have to say, a tremendous amount of work for what we got emailed today, and it was actually something that I wasn't able to put that much time and effort into, and I was wondering why the Parks Department hadn't, and why it hadn't been brought up previously in all the different reviews, why they hadn't also kind of dissected something that kind of laid out a more meaningful dialogue of where they want to go next. I don't need to have all the answers right now. I see that being a little unrealistic of staff, but a little more of a framework of saying what are we missing and when are we going to be providing that, even, I think is helpful in the document, even at a minimum. So passing it along with a recommendation of having certain aspects brought into this document, I think is a good idea.
So while everybody else is saying something, would you write down the specific things that you would put into a motion?
Can I hear first how I want to hear how everyone else is feeling about it?
No, I understand that, but would you do that to kind of move this along?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm with Joy. I agree. I think she, and Connie, although I didn't get an email from Connie today with the matrix in it, I wish I had.
I sent it to everybody yesterday.
Okay. So, yeah, I did not see that. But I agree with Joy. And I had a couple of questions, but I'll hold off on my questions until some of my other commissioners had a chance.
Well, I'll take a shot. So I think I agree, and I'll speak for in a minute about the goals and policies, but there's a lot in here that I do like. In beyond the goals and policies, the draft document wasn't in this packet, but we had it in our digital packet, and I mean, visually, I like it. I like the screening criteria for the major projects. I like having the projects in there and having them on a map. I think there's a lot there that's great. And it's pretty clear that there's a lot of work that went into it, and we were involved at steps along the way, and I liked seeing what we did here show up in the plan, so thank you for that. On the policies, I think what I thought when I was looking at them, I had two initial thoughts. One is, man, there's a lot of words here. It's a lot just to kind of get through, first of all. And then I realized, most of that actually was there before, from the previous document. And so it could have been and it could have been intentional to do it this way. I feel like we might have just been a little bit too beholden to the previous structure and the previous words, and maybe didn't quite take the opportunity to do a complete refresh on it. And maybe that was the intention, and if so, then that's okay. We've on lots of other plans and visions and strategic things lately, we've been doing big refreshes, so I think we're in big refresh mode, which is good. So maybe you could speak to that at some point. Maybe that was the intention, and just go around, and there are plans to do another big refresh and juggling. And then the last thing I'll say, and I think this gets to the general comments that Joy and Connie and others were making, and even just going back to the discussion about wildlife corridors and wildlife connectivity and ecology, you know, I see it all in here, but it's in lots of different places, and I think that speaks to what Connie was saying. There's, you know, opportunities, I think, just to move some things around and organize it, like the analogy of departments, organize a little bit more so that if you want to know about, you know, wildlife connectivity or restoration, you can go and find it. Or if you want to know about, you know, wayfinding or trailheads or whatever, you can find it. And so what it could be, rather than a rework of the policies, it could be just a bit of a crosswalk, and maybe that's where Connie was going with it, is, you know, where in the policies you can find, you know, those things that people care about. So, because, you know, we're a diligent group and we work through it. If somebody in town wants to say, hey, what are they doing with that trailhead there? Then they have to go and sort of like sort through a bunch of stuff. It becomes a bit of a barrier, I think, to them. And so just the user experience might be better if it's organized differently. So I'll leave it at that. And I support the idea of a bit of a reorg there, either you know, now or at some point in the future, and we can talk about what that looks like if we need to.
Bill, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree with everyone here. I think the overall document was great. I think what I'd like to see is, you know, we went through a list of prioritized projects, what we'd like to see in the future, short-term, medium, long-term. And then we had a single sentence or two about reinvestment. And what I'd like to see is, in the plan, what features, trails, et cetera, do we have now that we know we want to reinvest in, and how does that rank up against existing projects? We may find ourselves, you know, having a $3 sign type of investment, and it's not even showing up, and I'm not sure how that funding works if it's not even on the list to get approved. So while it's great to say, hey, we really need to make sure that what we have stays up to date and maintained, I'd like to see that integrated into the overall project list.
Great idea.
Nancy?
Several thoughts, going back to what Troy said, about the idea of maybe we can just do some reorganization to make the document easier to digest for somebody who's coming into this for the first time, wanting to know about trails and what our policies are for that. And quite honestly, Honey did that. So if we could just take that document and hand it over and say, with our blessing, this is beautiful and represents tons and tons of hours of work.
Yeah.
And doesn't get rid of any of the work that was done for the park strategic plan, just rearranges it. I think that would be fantastic. And I think it's an option we should really consider with that idea. Secondarily, on the idea of implementation and timelines coming into a strategic plan, my concern with that is funding and all of that really belongs to city council, and, you know, I feel like even if we put something in here, there's no authority behind it. And so I wonder whether it's the right method for saying it's really important to have an implementation plan and a funding plan for this. I don't know whether that belongs in the strategic plan or whether that needs to come as a separate report like the CIP.
I think that's interesting because to me, that talks about specific projects when we think about, you know, what we had laid out in front of us. I agree with you as far as like when we look at like, you know, when we look at the tip or things like that of seeing the exact, you know, land acquisition versus a dog park versus this or that. But as far as there are so many places in the document that talk about, well, we're planning on doing this. And so it's actually what I think of more of implementation is about the workload that we really expect from parks, and to say, great, you've identified areas that need addressing. When is that going to be addressed? And so we constantly talk to staff about, when can we get to this? And they say, we don't have the hours to do this year. We have to do this year. And being able to get an understanding really from parks, because I don't want there to be another, issue of 12 years, when if we want to put a number on it, of these things that seem like, hey, this is great and we'd all like this, but then they kind of evaporate into the ether. And so I agree with you as far as actual agendas and assets, but as far as every time in the document we start seeing, well, we'll plan on doing this, I would like to know when that is going to happen. And I'd like to know how staff is going to be addressing that, and who's to say they're behind or ahead when it's just into the ether, and to me, the
That's a
document
very
felt
good
that.
clarification, and I agree with that concept of let's make sure that the planning for this and the specific ideas behind it and the work doesn't get lost track of.
Yeah. I don't know if we're able to have Jennifer speak to kind of how she felt about Connie's document, because when I read it, I was kind of in a bit of a block, I felt like this was a document that had a really good first start, but I didn't know how to make it go to the next level in this meeting of saying, where does it then progress? To me, this was a really good first draft, but to say like, now we're done and washing our hands of it and starting on to whatever the rest of the workload is for the rest of the year for staff. So I would love to hear about how you guys felt the way that it was laid out, because it to me, it identified a lot of holes. It helped clean some stuff up, some redundancies, and I'm curious how you guys felt about the document.
Before you answer that, could I get some clarification on exactly what our role in PPC is in relation to this plan? Was it brought to us just as here it is, and this is a really good thing, and this is what we worked on, or are we supposed to, unless there was something major wrong with it, basically, pat you on the back and say it was good? Where are we in this?
The PPC's role is the goals and policies as they go directly into the comprehensive plan and the parks element of the comprehensive
Okay, so
plan.
we have
So that's your narrow focus, is the goals and policies.
Okay.
Trish, when is the next update of the park element?
We update it when you do your plan. That's when we update our, the
But when is the
comprehensive
next?
plan.
Okay, but I
But
didn't know.
it's annual.
It's fall.
The comp plan is amended every year, but we wait for your 5-year, 6-year to update that element.
And when is the next step, did you perceive would be the next step in this process?
Well, our next step would hopefully be council adoption in July for the plan. And then we would go back and start. We know this park strategic plan was really, it was a first big and bold effort for the Parks and Recreation Department, for the city, for parks. It's very different than our past planning documents, which is one reason why there were so many other things changing with it. We kind of left the goals and policies kind of as was, knowing that as we get into this plan and we start working with it, we know changes are going to happen. We are going to have to make changes, and we knew addressing and simplifying the goals and policies would be a future thing. We didn't feel by changing them at this point, it was really making any significant changes in the information that was in there. I do understand, an ease of reference. Connie's weren't all verbatim, and they had been vetted through the park board already. So we'd, have to go back through them and make sure that we'd get the update according to their liking as
So do you
well.
have time to go back and rearrange, redo, we put in extra things, all the things that they've talked about? Do you have time to do that? And
Is there a deadline for getting this passed?
yeah,
Well, this was going to council July 16th. Well, it was the 2nd. I think it's been moved to the 16th.
And one project that's waiting for this is the update of the park impact fees. And so we're waiting for this to move forward so that we can come back and update the fees, because the fees are based on the future projects. So we can collect money from applicants to help pay for those new projects.
So are we able to
also-
send this back to the park board? Do they have time in their calendar to?
That would delay the park impact fees. What you could do, though, is add it to the recommendation, and then council can choose whether to send it back, have it on next year's work plan. They have more options that way if you chose to forward it that way.
So everything, at least I think, everything that's in there are great ideas. Whether they're arranged in the wrong place or not connected, you're always going to change it. And if there is a reason, like the impact fees that have to be, we need them in order to do it. And so going back to what I said to Joy, if you could put down the 4, 5, 6 things that you think need to be added, then we can forward that on to the park board, to Jennifer, and to the council for them to take a stab at looking at this. And, you know, they could just say, hey, you know, we need all this done. We're going to wait for the impact fees till it has all these things put together. But I think right now, this is one of the things that needs to be, we don't have another year to go back and really address sufficiently everything that's come up. So if we could, you know, what's in there, are all those ideas good?
Let me take a step back. Trish, can you tell us more about the impact fee and what's waiting on that? And then Jennifer, I think you said you guys need to do calculations based on the projects that came up during this park strategic plan in order to figure out what impact fee you'd like to charge, and then what's the timeline requirement for that?
Right. We were supposed to start the park impact fee update last year, but the park strategic plan, the outreach and the different pieces were taking longer. And so we postponed it, and because the impact fees have to be based on future projects that are going to add capacity for the new growth that's coming, because the applicants can only pay for the new capacity. They can't pay for an existing deficiency. And so without knowing what those new park facilities would be, we can't calculate an updated impact fee. So the impact fees remain based on the old projects. So we've been waiting on that data until the strategic plan has a list of those new facilities that would add capacity, and then we can base the fee on that. So it's sort of a chicken and an egg.
Can those get if we approved the strategic plan, even with the idea of sending some of these policies to, you know, be revisited, what would be the timeline in figuring out what impact fee you'd like to charge and then taking that through council?
And jump in if I'm wrong, but we were hoping at a staff level that if the strategic plan is finished this summer in July, then the park impact fees can be updated and in place by the end of the year.
Okay, and that's usually when the impact fees overall are reviewed for the city?
Well, it's usually, it takes some months to do the analysis based on how much the park facility costs, what's the percentage that the city would have to pay, and the percentage that the applicant would have to pay. There's a whole lot of calculation that goes into the rate study so that it can be a legally defensible fee.
Okay. But there's nothing where we have to meet a deadline in order, you know, like they annually have to update?
No, but at this point, because it's based on the old, you could say that we're subsidizing development because our fees aren't connected to the new projects that would help.
Yeah, I was just trying to get a sense of the timeline stuff.
Right.
Can I add a little tidbit to
Yes,
that? Is
please.
the impact fees can only be charged for projects that are an approved capital improvement plan. So we need the plan to be adopted to add the projects to the CIP to then add them to the park impact fee update. So there is a trickle effect.
Right.
So maybe a good strategy would be to pass this with the carrier that it be revisited in a year from now. Thoughts? That way they can get what they need for funding, and we can move forward with the idea of maybe restructuring it and adding a few attributes.
Yeah, I have a clarification question related to that. If this moves forward to council and council approves it, whatever, is there a point in time at which the policies would come back to PPC, or is that, I mean, without anything happening, or does that wait 6 years? Or how did?
Well, I think we can update the park element at any time.
Correct.
Because you do it annually.
Once a year,
so
right. We have
We
shot
can
once a
always
year.
come back annually.
So we could, so I think what you're saying, Ron, it falls in line with what an option would be, to move it forward with the rider that it, that we do come back and revisit the policies, so we could think more about the reorganization and the presentation of them. I mean, I think that makes sense to me. I mean, that assumes, because I don't think, it doesn't seem feasible for that to happen between now and the council meeting. I mean, maybe it does, but if it were me, it wouldn't. So, I mean, I guess that's, I'm thinking about that as another option.
Jennifer, since we have you, one other thing that was talked about tonight from the public was kind of the missing element of the other members of our community and our wildlife neighbors. And I'm curious, I heard a lot about playfields in this document, but a lot less about them. And I'm curious if you can speak to why that was not a major section.
It is mentioned a little bit, but the operational strategic project, the Green Issaquah, as we look at tree canopy, can also, as we formulate that scope, take a look at where those wildlife corridors are. And that would be an opportunity to include that in that body of work.
So would you say, since you said take a look at, would you say it's fair that the Parks Department doesn't really know right now? That you guys yourselves don't even have a map laid out of wildlife connections, corridors, places to be improved, where maintenance is needed?
There's existing maps from other agencies and stuff
Okay.
that we utilize.
Has that all been centralized into one document that's easy for people to see?
I don't believe so.
Kind of like we were working on the green necklace.
Yeah.
Is there another one that's?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Is
But-
that
but
something that
that's
you guys have talked about doing?
Yeah, as part of the, as I said, when we get ready to formulate the scope of the Green Issaquah, tree canopy would be part of that, also, wildlife. Looking at all of our green infrastructure, really.
When we were discussing the Green Necklace and the Central Issaquah Plan, we had mentioned protecting wildlife corridors, and wasn't it brought to our attention that that was going to be part of the Parks Plan instead of the CIP?
I don't remember that specific. Trish, do you know?
I'm sorry, I missed the question. I was writing a note.
Oh, so when we were discussing the Green Necklace and the Central Issaquah Plan
Right.
months back, I think it was brought to our attention that because we had talked about protecting wildlife corridors and the creeks, it was discussed that those protections would be part of the Parks Plan.
Right, they're bigger than Central, so they
Right.
wouldn't be just in Central. They'd have to be in the bigger plan, a bigger plan.
Right, but if they're not, so wouldn't it be in this policy document to have those protections covered?
I think there's also pieces in our, in the comprehensive plan under, I have to look, but I'm picturing them in land use, that there's parts about protection of wildlife, protection of open spaces, but we can look at those. But I think, as Jen said, there's parts that allude to that in the Park Strategic Plan.
Okay. Keith,
There's also a
you're grinning
concept-
at me.
I don't remember that commitment.
I don't either.
That it would be in the park plan. Do you?
There's
We get a
also,
general sense that we don't have a lot addressing open space, wildlife corridors, tree canopy, how the Parks Department is going to maintain some of that open space idea. And that was one of the things that I pulled out looking at what Connie had created, was this sense of, oh, that's where it is. That's how we're going to deal with and address these things. It's important to us. So, yes, I think some of it is there and some of it is handled through reorganization, but I also feel like it's just less addressed than perhaps it should be.
I would like to, can I add one little item? In one of the appendices, I forget which number, there is a habitat conservation account, which was part of the prior adopted plan, and we ended up moving it forward, basically unedited as an appendices to this document. So it is still in effect, and it speaks of our natural areas and our salmon species and vegetation, and preserving those in our corridors.
Okay.
So it is
I
an
think maybe this
appendices to the
comes into
document.
kind of a feeling from the community that I'm getting, that much like the idea of we need to reinvest in our parks and understand how we're going to do that, also just generally, how is parks going to handle and maintain and improve the open spaces?
Communicate too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, right now, it's just, a lot of people don't have a clear concept of it, only that they care about it. And so being able to concretely say, here are our values and here's how we're executing them.
Well, I think some of it was seen in the vital environment theme that came forward and how it relates to multiple projects that, you know, it is an important feature to the community.
I think, though, that what we're getting so far is that it didn't come through quite maybe how we're hoping it does.
That would be our aspirations for version 2, which would be, we're looking for more environmental protections.
I mean, I think at this point, at least what I'm thinking is that we send this through with the recommendation that the goals and policies come back to PPC at some point in the near future, whenever possible. So we get another chance to just, you know, work on it a little bit more. And I don't know what the actual process for that is, if it goes back through Parks Board and then us or whatever, but I think we would have more opportunity to make those specific kind of wordsmithing and rearranging things at that point in time. That's just my thought, but I don't know if that's true or not.
Right, you could do it both ways. You could do it that way, that it comes back, or you could sort of bullet them that everything looks great, except you would like a policy or clearer direction on open space, habitat, you know, whatever the 5 things might be, so that council gets to sort of chill those through their thought process and maybe add them, or maybe just throw them all to us next year. So you could do it
Can
either way.
combine those two?
Yeah.
So,
I would do both.
Yeah.
I would say, here are the things that we feel are missing, and also, we want a chance to come back at this and say, it needs to be reorganized so that we have a clearer consensus of the important areas in the park strategic plan, and that we get a chance to really hash through it.
Yeah.
I'd like to do it with the Parks Board.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's a given.
So what are maybe the 4 things that we feel are unaddressed, you know, need changes or should be talked about?
So we've mentioned wildlife connectivity, I think just ecosystem restoration.
So the scope of green Issaquah is the language of the Parks Department, what it kind of encompasses things like tree canopy, wildlife corridors. Is that correct, Jennifer?
Yeah, we
Parks
can
Department
include that in the
language
scope.
would say the scope of green Issaquah entails all multiple bullet points. Is that correct? Your language, you said, was the scope of green Issaquah, so I'm wondering if that's actually department lingo.
We haven't formulated what the entire scope would be, but it is one of the items we've identified that can be part of that.
So then we would like that formulated, I think. I think that's the, formulate the scope of green Issaquah, and then that has those substandard points of things like identifying maintenance for noxious weeds, that has, riparian corridor maintenance, that has tree life, tree canopy, that has wildlife corridors. You know, I'm assuming, you know, I then defer to my fellows at the Parks Board, because I'm sure they can go on and on about that, about those bullet points. So that one bullet point, I think, then encapsulates that.
I got that one. I thought she had one right after.
Remind me, Jennifer, the public had a resounding agreement of this plan to have, to kind of implement a, what were we talking about? I'm sorry, I'm totally spacing on what, implementing kind of the feedback of how the Parks Department was doing.
Level of service?
Level of service.
Oh.
So I would put that on. I would like to know exactly when that plan is going to be created and how and when it's going to be implemented. So I think that was a big one that for me felt like it was kind of out there. So I would put that one along with the scope of.
So you're wanting
Issaquah.
information on a strategic project?
I would like to know when we're going to switch to that, to the level of service.
I think that's part of a bigger council discussion.
That's not part of that one.
Good. I think that's a discussion that needs to, so I think isn't that part of what we're identifying is saying, here are things that we felt are
Lacking.
loose, yeah.
Yeah. I don't think that's a specific policy necessarily, but I do agree that it needs follow-up, and we'd like to know what the plan is for it progressing.
That wouldn't be part of our motion tonight.
So our motion has to stick to policies and goals, because that's the only thing that we're supposed to be looking at.
So then, like policy A24 is the community and neighborhood recreational corridor distribution connectivity. A27. I don't know. Oh, I need to go to a different place in my. Parkland acquisition. A24 is support the implementation of the green necklace, create an active, non-motorized connections. When is that going to be finalized? I mean, that's the thing, a lot of these things, a lot of these policies, I feel, I'll speak for myself, don't have any kind of measurable timeline to when they're going to be addressed, just that we like them, and so that's part of these policies being high level, so we're saying we're adding an addendum to council of when we'd like the Parks Department to say, when is this going to be a part of their workload? When will it be addressed? If it's not a part of their workload now, is it able to be in the next calendar year? If not, why not?
Or maybe somehow connecting the list of projects to the policies. So a lot of these policies speak directly to projects that are listed out. If we can connect those two, and a year from now, we get an update, and we see, no projects being done that relate to policies that we have say on, then we know there might be an issue.
Okay, so, number one, let's come up with a list of, say, 6 things that we'd like to include that we feel are missing. So, what are they?
So one is just a general reorganization of the goals and policies that aligns in a similar fashion to what was presented by the public, by Connie specifically. I think that's the main thing. I think everything that's in there is fine. It just needs to be organized so that you can find trailheads, you can find wildlife connectivity, you can find placemaking. Because right now, it's all there, it's just scattered about a bit.
Okay, second one.
I'd like to see stronger language around the signage and wayfinding and prioritizing those resources. I think the language that we have here is
That's C24, policy C24.
Policy C24 is weak, and I certainly, as a trail user, can appreciate knowing where I am when I'm on a trail. So I think people saying that shall be limited in order to preserve the visual integrity of the land, yes, absolutely, but I think we can also put a sign, even if it's a small sign. I think those are important things.
Number 3.
A connection between policies and goals and our projects list. So if we're saying something like, we want to protect existing features, trails, et cetera, what projects do we have that actually back that up or make that a reality?
Or
I actually disagree with that concept. I love timelines and a sense of when things are going to be implemented. I'm not sure if it belongs in a policy document.
Well, so let me restate, maybe not a timeline on deliverables, but, you know, if we have a list of projects that, 50 projects, I think we're 45 or what was on the list.
51.
If all of those kind of route back to only 50% of the goals and policies that are listed, I think we identify there's an issue there. So in my mind, the goals and policies kind of create, ensure that the projects that we do have in the books that we're planning on kind of make a reality.
So wasn't that the idea of the checklist was to kind of see if the projects met the goals of the policies?
Yep, and also the themes within
Okay.
them. So yeah, we kind of did that as part of the exercise with the prioritization of the projects, looking at what themes they were the themes that were within those buckets, the near-term, long-term. Were those projects, were there policies relating to those included? So that's why we added some of those theme-based policies to make sure that they were touching on specific projects.
Okay, so that really is taken care of.
Well, I think I'm hearing what you're saying is you're not getting a sense of whether or not that's the specific projects meet the policies. And so what we're hearing is maybe that happened behind the scenes but isn't in the document. Are you comfortable with that, or do you want?
I would agree. It's hard for me to go to a single page and say, here's all the, obviously we have the policies and the goals are in front of us right now, but mapping those directly to projects, that's the piece that I'm not finding in the document. If there's a theme page that references both the projects and the goals and policies, then we should be good, but I didn't see that.
I think there's a
There is
theme.
page.
I think it's in there.
Page 73, I think it is. Has the strategic projects kind of at a glance.
Okay.
This is where you can kind of see which projects are really hitting which themes, like connectivity. So the connectivity themes would then, be seen in that project. Now, some of the goals and policies I would like to add are more for operational purposes, and they will not tie to specific projects that were identified in here.
Okay, fair enough.
So Joan, then the other one is to formulate the scope of Green Issaquah, is the other point that we were hitting on. You wanted to list our ones of importance.
When we started this, I'm missing some of the original thoughts that you were going to use. And I don't think we've captured them in the 4 things that we've talked about here. And I can't remember what they were, but
So
I
I
knew
think
that they
the
were.
Green Issaquah idea covers
Covers a lot of it.
several of those,
Right.
but
Okay.
maybe we want to specify them because I'm not sure council's going to know.
Well, I think Jennifer does.
So I'm thinking you want to see more policies addressing things like wildlife corridors, those other
Tree
items,
canopy.
noxious weed, things like that in the policies. We don't know when we're going to get funded to do the green necklace work or the green Issaquah work. We know what we would like to do, but it's all based upon what funding we get from council to be able to go out and do that. So it may be premature for us to do that, but we know what body of elements we would like to include in that when we do get ready to attack that project and
So
have
then you
the
would be
funding for
able,
it.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's okay. It's hoping to be a real near-term project for us because we understand the need and the importance for that, but it's, going to be up to council as to when we get the funding.
Sure, so, but you would be able to, then it sounds like pretty quickly put together a document that states the policy of what you would like what you'd like it to be. Right now,
Well, it would be a
it's
scope of
choppy.
work that we would send out for an RFQ or RFP, something like that. I think if there's specific policies related to wildlife corridors or native habitat that you would like to see, we can make sure those are addressed. We just know that in that work, when we work on the green Issaquah, they will be included as part of that,
Okay.
because it's looking at our green infrastructure really in all of our native areas and the management of them.
I think that's what we're looking for right now,
Yeah.
is because as they're moving forward, they can take some of these policies things and incorporate them into today's
There are,
So looking at it, policy B1.4 is recreation and habitat interface. It's the only policy that I'm really seeing that really relates to, you know, like riparian corridors and wildlife habitats, and that doesn't even come close to
There
what I
are-
think we'd like to address. Where are you seeing?
Yeah. So there is, actually, I circled them somewhere. Sorry. There's a, so policy B1 is, you know, city shall promote and protect environmental quality, open space, wildlife habitat, multi-use recreation opportunities, on and on. The tricky, which is I think fine, and that's where you could house a lot of that, a lot of the policies about wildlife and any other ecological resources. I think the tricky part is that then you go like policy B1.3, and I'm not saying these for like changes, I'm just pointing out my thoughts. We talk about connectivity, strive to promote connectivity of natural and built environments, which is a good thing. Connectivity promotes health, sustainability, interaction, wayfinding, mobility, which is all about people connectivity. And then in parentheses at the end, it says wildlife and habitat, which has nothing to do with any of that stuff. And then if you go over to policy C, under policy C2, policy C2 is all about encouragement of play and wise use of vegetation, which is fine. For some reason, there's native vegetation, drought-tolerant vegetation, which are all good things, and then play areas and signage all under the same policy, which seems like you could take native vegetation and native drought, and I'm just restating what Connie has done, by the way.
Right,
And pull it up under policy B1. And there are other examples, you know, further down in C3.2 is native environment. And so anyway, I think it's just, I think it's there. A lot of it is there. It's just a matter of reorganizing it into those departments or buckets so that you can, you know, find the wildlife corridors, you can find the trailheads, you can find wayfinding. So for me, the reorganization is the first and most important thing. And then if at some point in the future, you know, we wanted to come back and look at the goals and policies more thoroughly, you know, that could be something that happens in the future, and I'd be fine with that. So.
Is that something we want to see this year, like in 5 months, or is that something we want to see next year?
I think, not knowing completely how the process works, my recommendation, I guess, would be that would be something that we would see after. I mean, I think if parks could do what they can, and depending on what council says, obviously, they do what they can with that. They get their blanking on the terminology, the impact fees squared away, because that's already behind schedule by a year. And then we could come back and revisit this, you know, I guess either later this year, possibly next year, whenever the timing worked out, to really dig in with the park board, dig into the goals and policies. I think that's the sort of path of least resistance at this point in time. Because
So we have reorganize, we
Sorry.
have signage. Well, you guys would keep on going here. So reorganize signage language, formulation goals, we're still with the green, then the goals be specific, and come back to us
Aspirationally in a year?
in,
some point.
if you put down a year, I think they're going to, you know, they have to go back.
They'll tell us, yeah.
And they're working on other programs and putting this all together.
we
and-
just lost one staff member too, so like to add that.
So, I mean, we can put in a year, but if it takes them a year and a half and they're not done, you know, that process takes longer. But if you want to put a date in it, or you can just say, come back to us when you're done, want to put a year in there?
Sure.
Okay,
Why not?
back in a year.
As a tentative target. Yeah.
As a suggestion.
Tentative,
As a suggested target.
suggested target.
So it sounds like for our, as far as our, I'm going to say, so for action taken, point 3, it is for these reasons that the Issaquah PPC decided to recommend temporary approval of these comp plan amendments with the understanding that the Parks Department will return to PPC in 1 year to work on reorganization and amendments needed as you detailed.
Okay, got that?
Pretty much.
Because you can't
she does.
really say
So is
with
that
the
a motion?
knowledge of, you can recommend that it comes back.
Right.
That's what it is.
We're recommending temporary approval with the understanding that Parks comes back to us. Obviously, council can say,
Right, okay.
we're not into that. But
Okay.
I'm trying to give you the actual language of what we're giving back to you, so that we're able to pass along this document with the understanding that we want it to be a living document that actually is got a concrete date of
Can I
of moving.
suggest conditional
Yeah.
instead of temporary? Temporary's a little
Yeah.
funky.
Okay. Conditional.
Because it's on the condition that this other thing happens, right?
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get
So
at.
can you change this?
The findings?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, okay, so, and then add my name to it,
Yes.
visualize it, or whatever you do to it.
Right.
Is that good? Did we find an area where we're able to move forward while still having this document be something that is more tangibly being worked on?
So I know that the Parks Board and you have put in an enormous amount of work in this, and you get on a certain way of doing things, and it sounds great, and it is great. I mean, I think everything in there sounds good, but there's just a few little pieces, so don't look at this as like we're redesigning everything or, doing drastic stuff. It just needs a couple little things that maybe you forgot to do, and that's basically all we're asking you to do, so. Just want to make sure you understood that.
I'm actually impressed with it. I think you guys did a really great job with it.
Well, thank you.
I just, as in any strategic plan, it always sounds so wonderful. Why can't we do it tomorrow? I know. We want the
Magic
parks,
wand.
we want the signage, we want the bushes and trees and the canopy and everything else, so. Anything else? Oh,
So she needs to
that's a
make the
motion. Was that a motion?
It was. Could you want me to restate what I had said before about the changes to action, to the action taken by the PPC?
So where
Yeah,
is she?
restate the motion.
Is she here?
Okay, I'd like to make a motion for a finding of fact as stated with the amendment of, for Section 3, action taken. It is for these reasons that the Issaquah Planning Policy Commission decide to recommend conditional approval of these comprehensive plan amendments with the understanding that the Parks Department will return to PPC in 1 year to work on the reorganization and the amendments needed as we've detailed, as submitted to the City Council.
Did Susan get it? If you could
Got it?
email that line.
Second?
I need a,
Because I think Jen.
I'll second the motion. Oh, Lindsay seconded the motion.
Perfect,
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
perfect, that's perfect.
Motion carries.
I'm going to put Susan up here.
So thank you for your input. I think we're all on the same page. We just have to put it together a little bit better, and that's it.
Was there a second to the motion?
Yeah, Lindsay.
I'm sorry, I was Lindsay.
Okay. Susan,
Thank
just
you.
send.
And now we're off to the horse.
The horse, yeah.
The horse. So, do you know the history behind the horse?
I don't know if I do.
I'll tell you offline.
That's a good idea.
One of our artists in the city put it together, and the Arts Commission planted it where it was.
Oh,
It was
cool.
a big, big deal that we did. Great horse. So, are we on to
Old Town.
Kristen?
We are. We're going to continue with what Troy called our big refresh mode here. And we're going to talk about the Old Town Plan. But what I'd like to do first is our tour on the 21st. Part of the purpose of that was to help us figure out what the boundaries were going to be, because we've had several discussions. One was to include Northeast Gilman and what used to be Old Route 10 and part of Central Issaquah in with Old Town. And another discussion came up regarding the southern part of Old Town. So we've got the maps set up at the table, and we'll just stand around it like we did before, and I have some markers, and we can talk about that, because it's kind of hard to discuss what you want your policies to be if you're not sure which area you're talking about. So I'd like to do that first.
So originally, that Route 10 was in Old Town. And then we had, oh, it was in the central area.
It was in central Issaquah.
Yeah.
And then it's been discussed that it was moved out of central Issaquah because the density wasn't wanted there. It didn't really have the same feel as what we were looking for in central Issaquah. So it was pulled out of that during the visions, which were adopted on May 21st, and we're out of our moratorium. And then the discussion came up, hey, let's maybe potentially move that into Old Town.
So exactly how do you want to handle this? If we do that, we are going to have a public hearing.
Right.
So we have to make sure that whatever we discuss is able for the rest of the people that are here to understand and see. So it's not go here and just point here and just kind of discussion. I mean, it's going to be something that they're going to base it on. So let's do this. And then have a public hearing.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So there's microphones down at the table so that people are able to understand your discussion. So we would be down there for as long
Okay,
as
and
it
so
takes
if
you
anybody
to
else wants
figure out
to come and see what we're pointing to, you're certainly welcome to do that. No.
Game show.
Don't we normally get cookies when we come down here?
Okay, so the solid red line right here is the existing boundary for Old Town. And this dotted line is old Route 10 that used to be in Central and is now out there on its own and being proposed for this area. And then this general area here is what is being discussed also. And I don't know what we would do with it, it's just come up a few times. So this is up to you guys to discuss and draw and do what you like.
So what have you heard from the businesses?
I've had mixed. I've only heard from 2 businesses specifically regarding this. And one was, we really want to be a part of Old Town. And the other was, I don't really feel like a part of Old Town. So why would we be a part of Old Town?
So what is the advantage?
Well, they'd be in a sub-area. But I don't know that there is any advantage. The zoning right now, I will let you know, next week there's a public hearing. And right now, the existing zoning is destination retail. The proposal is to rezone it to retail, which is what they were prior to being part of Central Issaquah. Reason being, in Central Issaquah, that's where we wanted our growth to go and our density to grow. So the heights actually weren't increased. The base height was increased a little bit as destination retail. The maximum height was still 65 feet, but the impervious surface was increased to 90%. And as under retail, it would be reduced to 65%. But because it's no longer where we are trying to focus growth. So, which growth is not intended for this area, or density is not, it's not trying to draw growth there either, so.
So you downgrade to 65. How does that change? Does anybody have to do anything different? The people that are there are going to stay exactly the way they are?
They can stay exactly as they are. Everything there would be, I mean, anything that's existing. The uses, I checked, they'd still be fine. They were all there under retail in the first place. So they were there. There are some that you look at that have, pavement. There are several that were built prior to even being annexed into the city. And some of those were non-conforming under retail anyway, just as far as maybe the impervious surface goes or something like that. But I think the uses are all.
Where are those?
Where are what?
Those properties that you're referring to, that's down in this area.
Well, if you look at the Grange, that's pretty much paved all the way.
That would be a non-conforming property.
Probably, and I can't speak really specifically to any of these properties. I haven't sat down and said, okay, this one has this much impervious, but just if you drive by and look at them, you can kind of make a general guess.
Triple X right there.
Triple X.
Do you really want us to just draw on it?
Yeah, I really do. And underneath it, if you want to see it, is an aerial map too. We were just trying to flatten these out.
So from what we've discussed before, when we were previously going through, we were trying to go through the neighborhoods. I remember us being pretty confident that we wanted this to be Old Town. This, I remember us saying, well, we have the gas station here, this, I think there's a paint shop right here. I mean, this could possibly be redeveloped to be included in Central. But we were pretty hardcore about this all switching to Old Town. Yeah.
Yeah. But see, the thing is, this is a kind of a gateway corner. I mean,
So if we include this, then does that mean that redevelopment of this now will have to align to everything in Old Town? I think we're okay
that's
with
the
that.
expectation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, right now is there anyone here who's questioning that boundary? All right, so you want to move down to the second boundary?
Yes.
Great.
Do you
Well,
also,
this is
people I have.
This is the other boundary we were all referring to, is why is this over here? And several of us have talked about adding this pocket into the Old Town boundary for consistency.
right, all I could think of I looked at the sewer and water lines, and all I could think of is they're still on septic down there. There's no sewer, but they're still in the city. There's a sub-area, so if that's a change you want to make.
Any
And then-
redevelopment would have to go to sewer anyways.
Yes.
When you, Kristen, at the beginning, you said, we talked about that area, you talked about this area. Was that, I know we have talked about it, have others?
It came up during a public comment one time.
Okay.
But yeah, and I think, part of the comment was that this whole feel is very different
Yeah.
from what people generally think of. And it had come up at one meeting that these are all community facilities in Old Town.
So what about the idea of changing it?
I know idea. Okay, fine. Going to pen.
So losing it all?
So give me the argument of why we would not. So I have a hard time with this because to me it's like I want to hold the schools accountable. They always just ask for exemptions anyways, and so they build whatever they want and we're not within the design standards anyway. So it's kind of a loose argument. But why would we not want to adhere to Old Town standards within that area?
To me, it doesn't feel like Old Town when you're going down on Second.
I definitely felt that way, especially by the time we're down here.
Yeah.
And the way that, the development
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, and then you also think front as it comes past this point, at what point
Do you want to switch to an aerial right now?
Yep.
Yeah, this is the
Plus barn. Or parking.
Oh, part
Ron,
of
you
it
want to
here.
pull off the mic on?
So
Thank you, sir.
Thank
this is
you.
all residential.
These are apartments.
Yep.
I know, which really
Duplex,
don't,
right?
yeah, they don't feel like Old Town. They're 1980s construction.
Well, at some point,
Some point
they
they
could be leveled and rebuilt. Do we want those to adhere to the Old Town standards?
Yes.
Well,
There you go.
and I think, so one related question or comment that we've heard at one point in time is like, where is the gateway from the south? Right now, it feels like, yeah. I guess it kind of feels like here. And if in the future, if this ever were to redevelop, there would be a real opportunity to kind of change the character of that gateway. Right now, it's, the intersection with Second's there, but then, it doesn't really feel like you're in Old Town until you get up here.
These are dated, I shouldn't say dated, but these are apartment buildings that are actually quite old and would be at risk of redevelopment. Probably sooner than later. Like 1950s architecture, mid-century modern apartment complexes. So if these were redeveloped,
So you'd like to put them on the historic register is what I'm
yeah.
If that was removed from the Old Town area, sub-area, would the design standards on them change?
Should be
If that's
rezoned.
what-
No, not unless you all propose to, you can always propose to extend them now, not far, but right now, the design standards only apply to the CBD and to the multifamily on Sunset. And there's been talk about extending design standards to the single-family duplexes in the area.
It almost here's why I struggle with this, is that you have Front Street. Basically, you have one side that would be in the Old Town, you have this side over here that would not be in the Old Town if it was redeveloped, and they would potentially could be competing with each other. So to Lindsay's point, you almost want to cut it off up here, or use the creek.
Is
to
this owned,
include it.
yeah, is this owned by the city?
I think it is, yes.
Yeah, when you're coming up though, there's a lot of green here.
Yeah.
So it's not, it doesn't look the same as the other side right now. When you're coming up here, there's a lot of open green.
There's a lot of mines here, so this is not what I would.
Yeah, so this is the creek, and what the city tries to do is acquire, yes. What the city's trying to do, the city tries to do is acquire properties all along the creek as they become available
Okay.
as part of the now the north-south creek border that they're talking about too. We've been doing that for years, so yes, a lot of those are owned by the city.
So I think our question is, do we want to either chop off this bit, or do we want to chop off this bit? Right now, we're saying we want to include all of this in Old Town. It's the problem that it looks disjointed, and so we're trying to make this boundary to be different. Because right now, we're saying that this is a corridor right here. And people are coming down from Issaquah, Hobart, we want to do Issaquah.
I don't think there's a problem, it just came up.
And really all this
It
is
just looks
around this
funny.
little notch.
That's it.
Yeah,
Or there was obviously discussion about coming up, like
Yes.
Lindsay was saying, and leaving all
Yeah.
this.
Yes.
Because the feel of all of this, you know, if you're looking at all of this, this is all similar density feel to it. When you get down to this, you've got school, and older, different density. You know, it definitely doesn't have the same street feel to it.
yeah.
This is the pool, right? Where we're at?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the designation is Old Town. And to me, that's Gilman, Old Town, specific setup. And then you go into the school districts, and I don't see an Old Town there at all.
I would agree.
Well, I know, but the.
It's a new school.
Yeah, you know, it's not going to be built like your house or any of the other downtown homes. I
Does the
just don't
zoning
see it as,
here-
I don't see it as Old Town. I mean,
Does
you
the
can leave it
zoning
there.
match the rest of Old Town?
So
Different, right?
down here is multifamily high,
Okay.
and Sunset is multifamily high. However, this one has design standards that apply to it, and that does not.
Okay. Do these get default design standards just
Well-
by being in Old Town now?
No, they comply with what we call our green sheets in the land use code, and they are design standards in there. They're not real specific.
Okay.
But they're there.
But if you eliminated this from Old Town, then these could potentially be
High density.
high density, but there would be no architectural standards.
No,
not high density.
the zoning is the same. They still, if they're
They're
in
still
Old Town or out of
single-family.
Old Town, they're still multifamily.
So
They still have to comply with the multifamily zone. Same, these over here are multifamily high as well. So they have the
So it
same
doesn't matter.
standards.
But their architectural standards would be different than Old Town.
They already are.
They already are, yeah.
Because the standards in Old Town only apply to Sunset and the CBD, not down there, not for single-family residential.
All right, so we're just going to back up a little bit. What's the point of having this in Old Town? What's the pros and cons of having it?
This is your discussion.
No, but
The pro is, it's already in there, we don't have to change it, and we are enabled a gateway down at the bottom there rather than up in this
When you're
area.
already, yeah. Because you're
Yeah.
undeniably in Issaquah once you hit the schools, I mean,
Yeah. But are you in Old Town? That's the big difference. You're in Issaquah, but are you in Old Town?
I don't think you are.
Old Town's a different look and feel.
Yeah. I feel like Old Town is there.
I would agree with that.
down.
Here, is this one right? There you go.
I know that.
Because that was so close to the CBD, and we wanted it
I know
to
that
be just a
people
small
from the
area to be
apartments,
affected by
in our
that.
apartments, the condos that are down there, came in and lobbied to be in
Right. That'd be weird though, because they're just not.
I mean, because it still feels like
think they're
Old Town.
going
You
in
know
a
where
good
the pool
direction.
is here. I don't all of a sudden
think
like
they're going
cross
in a good
over and be like, wait, where am I now? Like, it's.
I do. That's understandable.
Well, quite honestly, I do, because that intersection at
That
Newport,
first
I
light.
feel like I'm going out of
Yeah,
Issaquah.
that's the first light.
I don't feel that way until I'm down here.
I would agree with her. I feel like I'm in,
I think so.
But are you in Issaquah or are you in Old Town? There's not much
well,
new down
none
there.
of these are, none of these are mid-century modern until you get up to here. And these are all mid-century modern. These are not mid-century modern. This is mid-century modern here, which is, we're talking like less than five residential units here are mid-century modern until you get up to that.
I don't have a strong feeling about really this much, but I do like this boundary for Old Town.
So this is my first night, so someone remind me again, what is the difference between Old Town and here? I mean, there's no code difference, right?
There's just a little bit.
The design standards are matched here as they do
They
here,
don't.
right?
So the design standards only apply, you have design
The
standards
zoning
that apply to the central business, central
Right.
cultural and business.
Okay.
And to East Sunset Way.
Okay.
And only to about,
So if this stays Old Town, someone tears one of these buildings down, when they build a new one, is it gonna be the same
No.
design standard? So
It-
what's
it
the
goes-
advantage again of being Old Town other than business look and feel?
so if you're in, right now, there's not. Because you,
It's all about where we're putting the entry sign.
exactly.
That's what it sounds like to me.
And so let me propose something. If we feel that right now this doesn't feel like Old Town, but yet maybe we want it to, when we're planning for the future, we say, no, we want Old Town to grow rather than shrink, I think is the idea, right? Because
That's
even though right now that isn't the case as far as like design standards go in the future, we could, you know, our children's children could just, although the planning policy commission could say, no, we want strict design standards for all of Old Town.
Could do that.
Right,
And I,
so-
yeah, and I just asked Trish why back in 1999, design standards were being written. Why, this is multifamily high, and why they weren't applied down here as well. Multifamily high, and it was because it was so close to CBD, that they wanted that look and feel to be the same here. But weren't concerned about it down there.
Makes sense.
Well, we can change it with this one.
Yeah.
So going back to I think the basis question that we're all asking. If a developer was to develop units here, was to develop units here, it would be, you could develop the same unit.
They could look exactly the same, right? Yes.
There's no value in, it really comes down to where we're going to put the sign. The Old Town sign. I mean, that's really kind of where we're at.
I personally vote here. This is where, to me, it feels like I'm entering the
Issaquah.
old municipal center of
That could be
Issaquah.
the welcome to Issaquah, and that could be you're entering Old Town.
All right, I'd like to make a proposal that we start in Old Town here. Because these are all old houses, old units, right? And that kind of feels like that's where we're starting. I mean, you could make it here. But I think that's kind of where it starts. That's where you feel it. And it is,
I'm sure it's
all this isn't really kind of meaningless to be part of Old Town, especially with us. I mean, 100 years from now, this will eventually be old, but.
Not as old as that.
It'll never have an E.
Yeah. We'll call it the old school.
So how does this work? We have to vote on this or what?
Well, we need a consensus. And then we can start the rest of our discussion.
All right, so let me ask, consensus. Make Old Town from this point, include these.
I have a really hard time chopping off all this. It feels like we're shrinking
Old Town?
potential. I get though on the face of it that it doesn't actually do anything.
It's only cosmetic. We're not losing any of
Yeah,
this.
because I mean, these over here are not all that different, so we're not, yeah.
Just remember that, I think it was at our last meeting in the training when you showed all of the, like the original town and then all the annexations, that map. the original town, Old Town,
Was smaller.
Yeah, it is, it's right.
It's smaller than the,
But you said we had people from this neighborhood come, and they wanted to be part of Old Town. So,
Well, not a lot of them.
I mean, if we're really talking about where we feel Old Town starts and stops, and you have people in this neighborhood that would like to be part of it, and there's really no benefit one way or the other to say, put Old Town up here versus leave Old Town down here, I'd say just leave it. Leave this part of Old Town, and that way those people are happy with being part of Old Town. I don't see any value one way or the other way to change it.
To me, Old Town is based on business. That's, once you get here, this is where the businesses start. This is what feels like Old Town to me. It's not residential.
Yeah, it's the residential that surrounds and incorporates those businesses, but I would agree that that is the core feeling of it. The other thing to think about is how could this Old Town sub-area be used in the future to perhaps designate things like architectural standards? Yeah, and if so, would we want it applied to that area? Or does this area feel more like that?
All right, I'm just gonna throw in another option. What if we actually did this? So it came down and we basically just annexed the school out of Old Town, but we keep this crazy weird tail.
goes from a fish head to a tail.
Yeah. Like a fish. So
Porpoise or something.
something, yeah.
Call it the high school, middle school sub-area.
It has to be part of something,
Has to be part of a sub-area.
Right?
You could actually use the Rainier Trail as that corridor instead of using.
Yeah, that's a good point, because you've got the
Here would be
bus
the-
station and all of
Here you
that.
got the, somewhere here is
We just consolidated all of our
It's just-
neighborhoods.
yes.
It seems crazy to now create a sub-area plan when we're absorbing another one, you know?
this is all the Rainier Trail right here. So basically, this would be annexed out, and this would remain in.
So then would we have to create another neighborhood for that then?
Yes.
Yeah.
it would be part of, we'd have to divvy up the sub-areas in a different way, but
Seems like we're forcing it to leave residential. And they tear one of these down, they're not going to have the same architectural.
Well,
they
If
could
we
make
keep it all
logical
Old
sense.
Town, then we have it clean. We have our,
Could be the school.
you know, what is it, 4 or 5 neighborhoods?
but thinking 20, 30 years out, if someone was to come in these apartment units or these condominiums and buy them out and say, we're going to develop this, then they would be.
No.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
It
there's
doesn't
no
matter.
control.
Not right now.
difference.
Yeah, not right now.
I just think it's odd to have that skinny, I mean,
It
it's
is.
too odd.
This-
You either stop it here or go all the way up here.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
think, John.
Those are the two options.
The
So-
problem is I'm not hearing a sales reason to take it out, I'm not hearing a sales reason to.
Yeah. The sales reason to take it out is it doesn't feel like
Yeah.
Old Town.
Agreed.
This is Old Town, and this isn't. That's
Old
take it
Town,
out.
this is where the business is, that's what the argument for taking this out. This is all residential, this is all business or mixed use, right? So it's,
Well, not all.
No.
no,
There's
but,
a lot of.
There's a lot of residential. This is residential.
Yes.
yeah.
So someone,
But it's gridded residential that is designed to, you know, walk to the business areas there. Nobody's walking to the business areas.
so why would we not want to remove that from Old Town?
Because we'd have to create another sub-area plan rather than right now, it's part of a
You
neighborhood.
don't necessarily have to create another sub-area plan. You just have to incorporate it into sub-areas.
So we'd have to create another neighborhood name for it.
Right. What is
So
this?
this, I think this is the Newport sub-area, and then Sycamore is down there.
So couldn't we put
Folded in?
Sycamore? Yes, it could be folded into Sycamore.
Okay, so that being an administrative move, what's the value in us?
Well, no,
You all have to approve it.
Yeah, that's more than administrative.
Well, I realize it.
Okay.
But we're just changing name of one. I want to know what is the physical benefit to leaving it in Old Town? Looking 20, 30, 50 years out, why would we value this being part of Old Town? And then we already clearly decided that we know why it doesn't fit. But why would we want to leave it in?
When I come down here, I'm not going to say, oh, look, here's Old Town and here's somewhere else. When I get here, I know Old Town, like both directions out of my car, I'm in the middle of Old Town.
Can someone
Yes,
tell me
I
why
agree.
we would want to leave it in Old Town? Aspirationally, 20, 30
The only
years out.
reason I can think is if somebody wanted to take the Old Town sub-area and create architectural and design standards, and we
whole
wanted it
thing.
applied down to that area. Personally, I don't think, I mean, that's stretching. That's,
Well, to your point, cat's out of the bag. This is 1980s and 90s construction with only 2 or 3 mid-century modern back here. And, now throwing mid-century modern in Old Town. Architecturally, it doesn't fit when you really get here, and those are just houses.
The only thing that, Old Town with an E is a special district. That has Gilman Boulevard, it has old,
Stuff.
well, it's not old, it's
our origin.
It's
Yeah.
or original, it's different. So that's why you have the E on Old Town,
Yeah.
because it's special.
Exactly.
That is going to be redeveloped, and it's going to be redeveloped with high buildings. It's going to look
Yes.
nothing like Old Town. It doesn't have the same flavor. So we could go and discuss this forever. So we have 2 options. You're laughing at me.
No, you're right.
Because we can't make up our minds, it's wellness, yes, there's no reason for this. So either we cut it off somewhere, or we go all the way down.
Yep. I recommend we cut it up here, Old Town, and pull this in.
I agree.
yep.
Is that a motion?
Or we just raise our hands and see who we need to talk to.
Make a motion.
So I'm going to be the stick in the mud. I say keep it.
Well, is there a motion
I
to
move,
do one?
so I move to change the boundary of Old Town as drawn on the map here.
I'd request we hold any motions until after we have the public hearing.
Yes, I'm fine with that.
But
Well, no, because you all have
we
to
need
have,
a consensus now.
Okay.
Doesn't have to be a
Yeah.
formal motion, but
It sounds
do
like we
need
have a consensus on 2 options. One is to chop it as designated, or now not designated, or.
With the blue line.
We have so many red lines, I want.
That's, okay, so we have option 1 is the chop, whereas option 2 is the leave it as is.
Yes.
Can I throw an option 3 in there?
Sure.
Gosh.
What?
He wants
He wants to
No, it's not.
move the tooth from there to there.
I mean,
Well,
could we
okay.
then just
I'd like to explain the idea.
No, yeah.
No, I know.
You're drawing to get your sign right here.
Because when you come into this
through the
area
middle
here,
school, yeah.
if for some reason we ever wanted to put, say, front street lighting or something like that, some decorative form that comes down here, it would match this as people are coming into it. It would be a soft entry into Old Town.
So you
That
want a
would be
sign
my-
that says you're almost Old Town and then another sign?
You're nearly there.
Crossing the yellow line, my friend.
The hellscape of this board has alleviated.
I like that, well done.
Okay,
3 options.
so we have the concept. We have 1, 2, now 3.
I can tell that I'm in a winning position.
So I get the feeling the consensus is to move the southern part to Sycamore. And the north part remains in Old Town.
And we create a new tooth.
And do we create a new tooth or not? No.
I don't think so.
Okay. Just, we needed that for discussion's sake.
Yep.
Okay.
So if we start talking about design standards and whether or not we were going to move them south or not, we needed to know that. So now I know that the discussion is pretty much going to remain north of Banks.
Two options.
Two options, not confirmed yet, not voted on yet.
I'll see you keep taking
A
more.
direction for
Yeah, either we keep it in or
like
we
a mist.
chop it, I think is what
And
the
we'll have
options
to,
are.
you know, even if we don't decide that that's where you chop it, I think that it can be decided that somewhere in there, based on whatever. So we're going to go back up, and then we will have a public hearing, so we can
Great.
get comments, and then you can make
Good.
votes.
Glad y'all like me too.
Good.
All right.
Makes me feel better.
Do you want to talk about the franchise stuff?
Yeah, I'm going to, it's in here.
Okay.
It's in here.
Okay, but are they taking testimony first or no?
Well, I was going to do my presentation first.
Okay.
Okay. Switching gears. Oops. Wait, I need a pen.
Oh,
Thank you. So switching gears, for those who are relatively new to this and maybe not have attended before, this was first adopted in 1999. There has only been one amendment to it, which was in 2009, at which point we took out any policies referring to the bypass. In 2015, a council goal was to start addressing Old Town. There were several different things that came up, so a task force was established. It was primarily an economic task force, but it was a task force. 2016, based on some of their recommendations, the Old Town Plan update began. And part of it was the task force, like I said, addressed mostly businesses and Front Street and Sunset, but the council said we want it to be a bigger look. So that's why we looked at the whole plan and making revisions to the plan, which would include single family. In 2017, April 2017, over a year ago, you all made a recommendation to approve the amendments that we'd made. They went to council, they went to Land and Shore 3 times, and then they remanded it back to PBC. So one of the reasons, we've already discussed that. One of the reasons that it was remanded back was because the plan was very abbreviated from the 1999 plan, but then it was abbreviated even more so that the council thought that it needed another look by PBC and another public hearing for the public. We also have added an action program, which includes now and short-term and longer-term, and the proposed changes to the boundary. So I don't think I will go through every policy. I will kind of touch on them. If you all want me to stop, feel free. I will take a look at all of the goals and just kind of talk about some of the things in there. So the first one is Goal A. So we have the same elements or chapters in here that we do in Central. We have community, connectivity and mobility, environment, economic vitality, and housing. And we actually added a housing section that was not in the 1999 plan. So, placemaking, create inviting, identifiable, and desirably aesthetic civic and cultural gatherings places that inspire community engagement. So, make public improvements where people want to gather, design gateway features, and at your recommendation, we added north, south, east, and west, not just one. Use wayfinding and art to showcase Old Town and support special events like the Art Walk, the Wine Walk, Salmon Days in here. Continuing with Goal A, formally recognize the abundant treasures that are in Issaquah, or in Old Town. I mean, about a half to two-thirds of those are in Old Town. Incorporate additional lighting into public gathering spaces and partner with property owners and the Downtown Issaquah Association, or DIA, to consolidate amenities such as garbage and parking, which is something that came up during public comments. B, Green Necklace. Continue the Green Necklace through Old Town by way of a concentrated and connected park, green space, and non-motorized system. This will evolve as the park plan evolves, but we've worked with the park plan on these policies, and they are fine with them as they exist now. So. C, this is to maintain the traditional building character in both the cultural and business district and the Sunset neighborhood while allowing these areas to grow and evolve. So things that have come up are reducing the height on the CBD down to 4 feet with setbacks, to
change it from impervious surface requirements to green requirements, because we have what the task force called grubbery, which might be a little 3 square foot area of shrubs that don't do anything, to update design standards and ensure that the scale remains consistent with everything else. Similar in the multifamily along Sunset, the multifamily high area, but that is to allow a maximum of 3 stories as opposed to essentially the 4 that are allowed now. I think it's 40 feet. Neighborhood ownership. This is a plan to engage residents more often. Right now, I'll admit there's no plan to it, either annually or semi-annually, or as events come up, but come up with a more formalized way to engage neighborhoods and what's going on in Old Town. Connectivity and mobility. This support the placemaking vision and character of Old Town by developing safe, efficient, and effective multimodal transportation network that prioritizes pedestrians and bike lists. So prioritize pedestrian facilities, meaning fill in some of the sidewalk gaps that we have, especially in the single-family neighborhoods. Enhance and make better connections for bicyclists, not only within Old Town, but to trails and trailheads, and work with DIA to add weather protection along front. Support the continuing on that, prioritize cyclists, facilitate mobility options such as the trolley, which came up here, a shopping shuttle to improve mobility options for Old Town, and work with King County Metro and other service providers to add routes, increase frequency of service, and increase service options in and around Old Town. Reinvest, this has already started, revisit traffic neighborhood calming strategies and implement improvements that discourage cut-through traffic. We did define this. You all asked us to. This is an old version, and we did define it. It's in your packet. Definition of cut-through traffic, and develop and apply solutions to manage regional traffic impacts on Front and Sunset. Increase availability of parking spaces and come up with alternative solutions such as shared or parking districts, and update parking requirements for new development. This one came up with the task force. They were interested in potentially, they say that one of the difficulties in redeveloping their properties is the amount of parking that's required, yet the amount of space that is not there. So they were looking at potentially duplicating the central Issaquah parking standards, but none of that has been decided. It's just a proposal from the task force. So environment, enrich Old Town by retaining and enhancing connections, both visual and physical, to the natural environment. One that you all worked on was require building setbacks to preserve views of the Issaquah Alps, Mount Rainier, from Northeast Gilman, Rainier, East Sunset Way, West Sunset Way, Front Street, and Front Street South. It became very more specific than it used to be. Protect and contribute to the enhancement of Old Town's natural, I think that's amenities. Amen. I don't know what happened. But this is more about the
It's after
development
garden.
itself. Pardon
The
me?
rest of it's after garden.
Okay.
You're typing fast.
I don't know what happened. Who knows? Economic vitality, retention and attraction, promote Old Town as a vibrant neighborhood, business opportunity, so attract businesses that provide goods and services, both daily goods and services to both residents and visitors. Look at pop-up ideas, temporary solutions, commit to expand the fiber infrastructure we talked about, and implement code revisions that allow Old Town businesses to be competitive with other businesses and retail spaces. This one we want to talk about. So last time we were here, we talked about formula businesses, which are either franchises or chains. And we asked if you all are interested in looking at a way to potentially regulate or limit what can come in here. So what we threw at you is 4.5, proposed policy. But after a little discussion took place, we thought, is it really the use that people don't like? Or say, for example, heaven forbid, Jack's went out of business and an Office Depot went into that space as is. Would that be okay? Is it really the use that is the concern, or is it the look of the use that's the concern? So up here are 2 other options for you all to discuss. So the first one is actually dealing with formula businesses themselves and consider limiting those. but they would still allow grocery stores, gas stations, banks without drive-throughs, and some services, professional services. Other options are to amend the design standards to ensure that these new businesses, need to comply with treasure number 3, which is Old Historic District, Old Front Street, with small and independent shops, which also kind of limits it, but within the character. And the other one is a little tighter. Consider establishing a threshold for redevelopment projects in the cultural and business district that determines at which point non-compliant properties must come into compliance with the Old Town design standards. Meaning, if a property comes in and they're going to redevelop their property or remodel their property, and what they're doing is, say, 25% more than the assessed value of their property as it exists, then their whole building would have to come into compliance. Okay? Any questions about that?
So just to use an example, so in downtown right now, like the Domino's down there, but Domino's is clearly a formula, it's a franchise, but they moved in and they're in the historic building as it is. So under option A, that would be okay.
Yes.
Under the original proposal, they wouldn't be able to go in there at all.
Right.
Okay.
And can you specify what a professional service is?
It would be, Keith, our economic development director, might be able to explain it better, but when it comes to me, I think of insurance and maybe banking and, am I on track there? Yeah, that kind of thing.
Attorneys, tax
Attorneys,
specialists.
exactly.
Okay.
So
Would we consider a big box store a grocery?
Actually, one of the things that's in here that would be exempt would be a grocery store.
Right, I'm saying, would a big box be considered a grocery?
Oh, you mean like a Target that sells groceries?
Groceries.
Yeah, or let's say,
Yeah.
Or there's the, smaller Walmart that is mainly groceries.
Mainly groceries. I think that would need to be looked at, because that's a good question.
We have a definition of grocery store.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is we know we want, and the community needs to be able to have a grocery store in Old Town. However, most, being, and independent grocers are unfortunately going by the wayside, and it's harder and harder for them to survive, and so.
So I'm assuming that if we went with either one of these, and we did a definition of grocery store, what you all are looking at is, say 75% of it is groceries, or, 75% are up, somewhere in there.
So let's not become the police of the percentages of marketable goods in the store, right?
Right, I'm just looking for their idea of what definition of a grocery store is. Because he's right, you cannot limit or mandate anything that happens within the building itself. But
I'm sure there's a good
Yeah.
definition of grocery store versus big box store
Right.
out there that we can find
Right.
and use.
So
Okay.
help me understand the formula business again. What is the definition of a formula business?
a formula business, I can actually pull up.
It's like a chain
But
store
is it-
or a franchise.
Or is it, a chain store or franchise store?
So
That has 10 or more businesses throughout the United States, 10 or more of its businesses
Locations.
throughout the United States.
Okay. So in Old Town, going with option B, Domino's would not be able to open up an establishment in Old Town, even if it met the architectural standards.
Well,
That would be
No,
A.
that'd be-
If they were
couldn't come in
moved-
again, they couldn't
That would be
open
A.
up a
Yeah,
second
right,
store.
yeah.
They can
Okay.
stay there as long as they want, though.
But
Yeah, yeah,
Stan's
yeah.
Barbecue could, because Stan's Barbecue is a one-shop deal.
Correct.
Well, where do we draw the line? Like, let's say Burgermaster wants to come in. They're a
Yeah.
local business, but they have several options. At what point are we saying, franchise versus
Sounds
big
like
box?
10 locations.
10 is
Okay,
the number.
Thank you.
I actually like that. Keep it more mom and pop, keep it more Old Town look and feel.
Is there a position of the city on these three?
No, not right now.
Do you want us to decide tonight, or since the staff doesn't have a position,
Well,
do we
I
need
mean,
to take
you
one?
make a recommendation tonight, and then we take it to city council, and it's
Right.
discussed there.
Because this was
too.
something that you all asked for.
Just a quick question on option B, which is, they would be able to come in if they did an upgrade that was greater than you said 25% or
Right,
whatever.
I think in the rest of the city, it's 50%
Okay.
of the,
So that would basically, essentially, the spirit of that then is that investing in Old Town, so we're letting them come in because they're investing in complying with the architectural standards and all that stuff.
Correct.
Right.
Okay. That's all, it was just a clarification. I mean, I think my position on this is I like the way 4.5 is written, which doesn't, doesn't allow, it doesn't have any exceptions to it, basically. It just says no formula or chain restaurants are allowed in Old Town. I'm good with that.
Okay.
Do Old Town design standards, I know they deal with height, do they deal with square footage?
No, not with square footage. They're limited by their setbacks. So they may have a 0-foot setback in the front, but they have a 10 or 15-foot setback in the rear. And then they have side setback. They may have side setbacks as well. So their square footage is limited that way, but it doesn't say you can only have.
In the streets or alleys?
Right.
Okay.
Okay, I want to throw a monkey in the wrench of our discussion down there about the tooth and actually going all the way out to the original boundary. If we went with 4.5, and Keith, this is a question for you, would businesses open up in the southern side of Front Street?
Well, are you taking, you mean south of?
Single family.
Sorry, this is for Keith, but do you mean south of Evans?
Yes.
Yes,
So,
if they're allowed there by the zoning.
so in sense, we would actually have protected Old Town using 4.5, but then we would have Domino's just south of Old Town.
There's
Well,
no
or if it
commercial
goes
North or
zoning.
east or
Yeah,
west.
I don't know that
You
this,
couldn't have
Zoning right-
Domino's in
zoning would support
multifamily, I don't think.
Yeah, we need to know the zoning to
right.
affirm
And,
that's actually
you know,
correct.
it's multifamily high and single-family small lot, and those aren't allowed there.
So you couldn't get a Domino's.
Okay. I'm trying to think out 25 years when we have all these people moving in and our population doubles and all of a sudden businesses go, we can't be in the middle of Old Town, but we want to be close to Old Town, so we're going to go south.
They
We
can't go-
wouldn't see that happen.
No, they could
there's no
go to
commercial.
Gilman.
Yeah, they would go on Gilman.
Central, right?
So,
Right.
so think about this a little bit differently, Ron, because what this affects is the property owners, not the businesses. So if you guys create a smaller bucket, right? If I'm a property owner and I own one of those storefronts and I have a tenant leave, the only people that I can populate that space with is now a smaller bucket. Those local mom and pop businesses generally can't afford the same as those regional franchises. So as a property owner, what you're doing is potentially diminishing their rent that they could get for their space. So it's not about the businesses. There will always be some small business wanting to go into a space if it's cheap enough. But this is really more affecting the property owner. So just, I wanted to put that spin on it because
Good
that's
point.
really the way this works
But
out.
that's maybe not a problem that's fully happened yet. It's easier to expand in the future than it is to contract it. It's easier to say, you know what, we're not getting the growth we need, or people are going out of business, we have empty buildings, and opening up to chain stores or what have you, than it is to allow them all in now and decide we made a huge mistake and try to contract it in the future.
And this would also prevent things like the dollar store, Lazy Boy, and those establishments from coming into Old Town as they have recently.
Has the city attorney seen this?
Pardon me?
Has the city attorney signed off on this?
No. We've talked to the city attorney about it and what you can and can't do. And what we've written down here is fine.
I
But
know
not regarding a specific policy.
Because
no.
remember, too, these are policies. If this went through, we would certainly have him help us with the code.
Yeah.
Kristen, I know you already did this, but can you talk me through option B again with the investment? So what I'm hearing what you're saying, Keith, that we don't want to limit the pool of, potential tenants for property owners. But then I'm thinking, then how does option B affect property owners? It seems like that would be a good thing for them because we're requiring chain stores to invest in the.
So Chili's wants to come into Jack's.
Yeah.
Okay. But they need to make improvements. And their improvements are going to cost more than 50% of the assessed value of what that property is currently valued at. If that's the case, then they need to bring the rest of the building fully into compliance with the standards. Or let me use a different one. You've got houses up on Front Street that are part of CBD, and they want to do it. They'd have to come fully into compliance. And if the standards are that they have to come up to the front property line, and all the parking has to be in the back, it's essentially a rebuild of that property to build something in compliance.
Can the city staff reach out to DIA and get a comment on this?
We can.
Talking about the chamber?
No, the Downtown Issaquah Association.
Yeah, Downtown Issaquah Association.
Like,
There's no reason not to reach out to the
chamber as well.
too, because
Yeah.
it's affecting the
Yep.
business.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, because like, on the surface, I like the idea of not allowing chain stores in Old Town, but I don't like the idea of, penalizing the property owners, basically, and not giving them the opportunity to have tenants. And I don't know enough about the relationship between property owners and tenants to know what B would do. Like, because B might also limit it if the tenant's like, well, if I'm not going to go there because it's just the economics don't work because I have to invest a bunch of money to come up to standards, then I'm going to go somewhere else where I don't have to. So it seems like, and that's a complete hypothetical with no data, but it seems to me that right now, I'm changing my mind that the best option, I think, is option B. I know I'm wishy-washy.
Is anyone in here familiar with the dollar store and how that process led up? I'm just curious because it sat vacant for a while. So was it vacant because we couldn't find local businesses to invest in it, or was it vacant because the owners were waiting for the highest bid, which is a chain store?
I think it was the highest bid.
So, this is economics. There was Red Apple Market was willing to take that space at $8 a square foot. Dollar Tree's 12.
What was it? When was the market? What were they?
The market's what you can get, right?
No. When the original market was before they shut down, what were they paying per square foot?
So they were probably around 8 or 10. The problem is also that market, because they kind of closed in the middle of the night, they left the owner with not only a big problem because the store needed to be cleaned out, but also expectation for lease payments that the property owner then obviously didn't get. So their desire to potentially risk that outcome on another local user was also another reason why they went with guaranteed money, right?
Yeah. Because that's my other concern, right, is we open this up to chain stores and they start out bidding and outpricing the mom and pops that may have the economic ability to move in. And then all of a sudden, we're stuck with chain stores in Old Town.
Yeah, I was thinking the same.
yeah, and chain stores can go anywhere else in the city.
Yeah.
And so being able to,
Highlands is.
Because it's economics. If I own the building, I'm absolutely going to want the most I can possibly get per square foot. I don't know if I'm morally going to say, I'm going to save it for a mom and pop and make half the money, right? That's not what they're there to do.
Right. And what if it didn't look like a franchise or a chain store? What if it was a chain store, but they just changed the logo, changed the sign, changed what the inside looked like? So it looked, there's some towns that require you not to look like.
The storefront, you're saying?
Right, like the logo's different, or because they're trying to look more like the town that they're in.
yeah, Leavenworth is a great example of that.
We have some ideas over here.
Right. I'm just saying, is it, from the
It's a
first
fair point.
question, is it the use or is it what the use looks like?
It's really a deep analysis to think about, because we are really making the decision between franchises that can pay more money versus the mom and pop. So we're really creating a protection for small mom and pop operations to have businesses in Old Town versus chain operation that could easily be in the CIP.
I think that's fair, Trish, to your point. If, we'll call it mom and pop, couch store had moved in where, where the Lazy Boy was, would we feel differently? I think we would. From my seat here, I'm saying that somebody selling chairs versus a chain store who had already had a failed spot in the city coming in, I feel differently about. So to use the examples that we have, I would say that it's less about what they're selling and more about how they're contributing to the community. And so I think it's more than just how it looks.
Yep, and if they go with option B, all they have to do is say, we're gonna
Change your sign.
we're gonna change 25% or more of our building, and then we're gonna go ahead and take the whole building down and rebuild a new building, and it may be within our height standards, but we lose the
Character.
character of the central district.
Well, they'd have to meet the design standards.
Yeah, they'd still have to meet the design standards.
Which are,
Pretty rigorous.
It involves windows and materials and doors and locations and
It wouldn't be the original
signs.
Colors
So
and,
right.
yeah.
I mean, so the design standards, are they current design standards for the Dollar Store and for Lazy Boy? Do those match the design standards?
They do not.
They were not in
No.
place.
Right, okay. Got it.
What do you mean they were not in place?
Weren't they not in place when those plans were approved?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, should we, Joan, do you want to move on? Do you want to continue this discussion?
Do we want to wrap up and actually have a vote on this portion, or do you want to?
Well, we need public comment before any vote.
Yes. I don't know if I would just want mom and pop stores. I would like stores that draw people in and and stay in and provide a service that the people here want. You're not going to have any big stores. They're small units. I don't know if that's really the right way to go. I don't want box stores in there, but I don't want just mom and pop stores.
Even just an Old Town? I mean, because you have the Highlands. I mean, there's other places in the city for all variety of businesses to go.
I know, but if you live in Old Town, you want to have some basis of staying in there. You don't want to have to get in your car and drive to the Highlands for everything you need.
And you think this will drive out the ability to have services in the area? Oh,
This is just a comment to me. I'm not sure if I want just mom and pop. Now, you can come in with mom and pop card store and a mom and pop this and a mom and pop that, and that's all good. And they, as a business, that's great. But is that what you want for downtown? Do you want an insurance company and a card store, or do you want something that's actually going to bring people downtown? And I don't know how you do that. A mom and pop could bring people downtown, and so could a box store that maybe is not the big Lowe's, but a national brand that is basically a small store. So to me, that's very difficult to.
You mentioned footprint, but we have buildings on Front Street that have multiple businesses, right? What's to stop a single business coming in and occupying multiple locations to where you do have a big box turnout that, stretches 200 feet of Front Street?
I am familiar with two different locations. Now they're in northern Michigan, but two locations where Ace Hardware has come in and occupied buildings in old towns, their central downtowns. And in one case, they did that. They knocked down the shared walls and took it all along the street, but the street still has the same character. You still have the same windows, you still have the brick, you still have everything that was there, 80 years ago. It just has an Ace Hardware.
I think we need to think this through. We're all over the place. There's no consistency. Well, there is some consistency, but we've changed our stories multiple times here. So I think we need to
What's our
rehash this out.
timeline, deadline? What's the requirements?
The idea was that there'd be a recommendation tonight.
But there's no
But there is no deadline,
Yeah.
and it just postpones it. We'd like to get started on the design standards sooner rather than later, but you want to get it right. You want to know what your vision is and what you're designing for before you start that.
So there's two issues. It's the drawing of where it is and the rest of the goals. So I want you to keep that thought, and I want to open up the public hearing.
Can I pull out one more thing real
Okay.
quick, please? Okay, so I'll skip most of this. It hasn't changed, economic vitality, housing. I will bring up the point, though, for residents that there is a proposal to do design standards for single-family housing, which would be like our single-family duplex area. That has not been done in the city before, but PPC has proposed it, and that's just to keep the character of the area. There are two new things that have come up. You'll see number 6 down here. So one of the things that we've discussed is kind of reducing or maintaining the density in Old Town. There are areas, and this is an extension of that, there are areas in Old Town that are actually receiving sites, which means, Bill, that there are sending sites and receiving sites. And if there are sending sites or areas that we would like to see remain natural or open spaces, and the development rights for those properties can be purchased and then applied to receiving sites who can build higher. So there are some receiving sites in Old Town, and this proposal would be to make code revisions to remove all of the Old Town parcels that are receiving sites from being able to do that.
Thank you.
So that is new in here tonight. Another thing that I apologize I didn't put in here, but I just want to point out that we did do it. Let's see, it's number 12 up here, which would now be number 13. It came up last time to conduct this says conduct a financial analysis to identify funding for implementation of the Front Street Streetscape Plan. In the plan, it does say, at a recommendation last time, to do the funding implementation of and it's cut off here, unfortunately, phases that address pedestrian areas, which would be front all the way in 3 different phases, all the way from Sunset up to Gilman. Do the financial analysis for that piece first, and then in the next section, 20 to 21 or 20 to 22, then look at a fiscal analysis for the rest of the streetscape plan. That came up at our last meeting where we discussed this. That change was made. Okay, I'm done. So
now I will open up the public hearing at 9:25 and ask if anybody wants to discuss the Old Town Plan. Please, sir. And I hope your wife is doing well.
She is.
Thank you.
Just some political thing. At any rate, I'm Bill Freisinger. I live at 415 Southeast Bush Street in the Old Town area. As a quick aside, the idea of not permitting transfer of development rights seems like a really great idea. And an objective for you tonight might be to agree at least on the boundaries of the map there. And I have an input on that, in that initially I like the idea of the drip going down Front Street, where there's old houses, until you go down to where the apartments are. But in thinking about it, I don't know what the zoning is in those houses, but sooner or later that's going to be developed anyway. It's on a busy street, so I'd be tempted to those houses that slide down a couple blocks, to have that outside on the grounds that it's bound to get redeveloped in an area that wouldn't fit in with Old Town. On the subject of the really naughty one about what you're gonna permit, I agree it's naughty, but keep in mind that the two big spots you've got, where Dollar is right now and where Lazy Boy is very different than kind of the rest of it. And what makes sense for the rest of it doesn't necessarily make sense for those. A grocery store could go in either one of those, admittedly, but I can't think of anything else that could go in that would fit your standards if you had rules about the, like big box stores. If you had rules about appearance, then that would be easier to work. I sort of like the idea that if you had a rule that, you know, would have allowed Apple to come in was that, well, that's sort of attractive, but not only is it awkward for the owner, but I got another big store, and I don't know what I'd put in that spot. So, anyway, think about these big sites in addition to the little sites when you're trying to decide what to do. Thank you very much.
I guess looking at the empty audience, it's my turn. So several thoughts. So I kind of think of this conceptually. I think there's a lot of, sorry, just for the record, Steve Pereira, Old Town, about 10 years. It seems like there's a lot of neighborhoods in Issaquah that are kind of organized and involved, and they had kind of specific plans like Talus and the Highlands area. And there was particular vision, and kind of what I hear now when I look at development of the Old Town neighborhood is a group that doesn't really have that same organization. And I hear a lot of people saying, this is what we want you to become. And it's not so much, I think, an organic sense of what people living there want to be told to have higher density, less impervious, or more, less impervious, or more impervious service. I always get that mixed up. So that kind of concerns me. Specifically, I was thinking about the Old Route 10 area was talked about being removed from the Central Issaquah Plan. One of the things I guess I would like to hear as part of that is what are the reasons pro and con for that from the city standpoint? Same thing could be said about moving the area that's south. What are the areas of pros and cons? I haven't really heard that strong argument why one or the other. The thing that occurs to me as far as the Old Route 10, it was originally thought it could be its own neighborhood. I know there are some businesses I would specifically like to slap this central cultural business district label on, like Bohm's Chocolate, like the Grange, like I'm sorry, the hamburger place that I can't seem to remember the name of. Thank you. That are definitely cultural treasures that I think we're going to lose to development if we just let it be zone DR without protecting them in some way. I think though you keep the area expanded from a sense of protecting what is the Old Town historic neighborhood and have it kind of be a transitional area, I think you need to look again 10, 20, 25 years out for our kids' kids to be there. What do we want to do to protect that area? Do we want to look at changing the zoning? All that. I think that needs to be a part of the discussion going forward. That was kind of big picture. The memo from the finding of fact sheet I found strange in that it talked about on June 14th, the PPC recommends doing certain things. It was printed out beforehand. I don't understand why it was printed out, presuming you were all going to approve what was encouraged, so I found that strange. Specifically, Amendment 3, this is on the finding of fact sheet. I guess I'm looking at the PPC not recommending I'm trying to find the exact wording. Environmental reviews not be considered that were applied April 21st, 2017. I think you ought to have requirement to have that for each proposed construction as it goes forward, not a blanket statement applied. The table of contents on the actually the whole town, the Old Town map with the whole with the horse picture on it. I just want to go through that, and yes, I'm sorry, I do have some comments. The quality of life section, so page 4, I didn't like the opening statement. Truly great neighborhoods are those that are organic, those that have evolved and grown over time, take place where people want to live, work, and visit. I think we can be a great neighborhood and still keep that character and charm that's in place, so I kind of reject that premise. Number 2, cut-through traffic has been worse. I think we definitely need to do something about that. But I think adding density of apartment complexes and businesses, retail businesses on the ground floor and apartment complexes on the top floors are going to only add to the density, add to the parking pressures that exist when folks have already rejected a tax proposal to add parking. And you already have traffic zones, streets that are exempted because we're already failing for the traffic areas. I think that needs to be considered as part of the discussion going forward. Same page, number 5. A lot of the business owners feel that development codes are outdated. Again, we're not meant to be the CIP. We're meant to be the cultural business district, the Old Town Subarea plan. Just because somebody wants to develop something doesn't mean the standard is old. So I think I reject that premise. If you want something different, then develop in the Highlands, develop in the Gilman Boulevard area. Lots of places to develop. Page 5, Old Town Issaquah will be, looks like the fourth bullet, a safe, diverse, and welcoming neighborhood. I'm just understanding what the term diverse means to. Does it mean types of businesses? To be something different than a unique and special character place? Will be big box stores? Will be whatever? That's the part that concerns me. If it's going to be something different than the business opportunities that make it unique and quaint, that draw people to it, that is the Issaquah that we think of when we think of Issaquah, then I have concerns with changes that would allow that to take place. Page 6, number 1, just 2 comments. So placemaking, there are some businesses, restaurants that have placed umbrellas and public parking. I like to make sure the umbrellas don't have advertisement for another place. It just becomes a billboard. It doesn't become part of the restaurant for seating, so it becomes more marketing. So no marketing allowed. The other was that you're not allowed to smoke within 25 feet of public buildings, so I think all those places should be no smoking. It should be marked and enforced by the current restaurant. If not, then enforced by the law. Moving down, goal C, 1.9, guess I'm only in favor of 2 stories worth of growth. There are not the 4 stories that are proposed. The same for 1.10, which would apply to the Sunset area. Part of my concerns are traffic is already gridlocked, parking is already gridlocked. You're going to add more people, more density. Where are you going to park and place those people when you don't have that in place today? Goal D, 1.11, establish regular and recurring community forum with Old Town residents, property, and business owners. And I guess I want to understand what the mechanism is for residents who have concerns, that is not just listened to and heard, but some type of mechanism that allows enforcement of those concerns over the prioritized business development that seems to be occurring. Goal E, balanced transportation, 2.3. I'm not a fan of allowing weather protection on the facades. I think the cultural business district is unique character and charm. If you allow weather protection, it's going to have a uniformity and sameness of the businesses. I think that's a bad feature. It rains in Issaquah, but it also blocks the sunshine when you put in weather parking, so I'm not in favor of that for that reason. Goal G, parking, 2.9. I guess I'm in favor. If businesses want to increase parking, then let them pay for parking, let them pay for structures that will allow that. I don't think that should be public funded dollars to promote the business. Goal H, natural environment. This is page 8. 3.1. So I guess I'm not as much a fan of green facades, living walls, and landscape walls. I'm in favor of the greenery and the lower density permeable spaces. I think if you take out an existing tree, you need to replace it with an existing style tree, not a shrubbery or a smaller green tree that can fit into a tree pot. Again, keep the same existing permeable surface requirements that are in place. I don't think you should allow 95% permeable, non-permeable surfaces. I guess I'm not a fan of the setbacks for the buildings. That was 3.4, 3.5. Again, replace existing aging trees with the same style of tree that you remove for carbon offset. Goal I, sustainability. So I guess I just want to talk about it, talks about the word encourage. I'm not sure we're not saying the word incentivize. So again, I'm not sure that I want to see public dollars spent for solar energy necessarily on the businesses without better understanding at least what that is. And 3.7 was the charging stations. I think residents already, if they live in Issaquah, they probably, and have an electric car, they have charging options at home, so I don't think we need that for residents. And I'm not sure that the cost.
If you have any, I don't want to cut you off, but you've gone through every.
I haven't gone through every, respectfully.
Close, really close.
I've got 3 pages.
But there is sort of a time limit. I don't know how to incorporate everything that you said. I know that some of the ideas are, valid. I don't know how to.
Is it fair to say you don't like this document, Steve?
I have some concerns with the document. I'm not sure that I'd say that I dislike it. And I was trying to address the specifics of what I didn't
Sure.
like, to try to be actionable in the hopes that you could find support for those things and make changes.
In order to fully address, I mean, that's what a public hearing is to hear your comments. But since there are so many, the only way I could really understand and really look at what you're saying is if you actually write it out. If you're willing to take the time to put some of those ideas, take the first 20 and give us some idea. I mean, because I'm having a hard time hearing everything that you're saying, and I certainly want to be able to address those ideas. So if you could write them down, email them
I
to
can't
us.
even read my own handwriting, let alone you.
Email.
So,
You don't type right on
yes,
a
except you're going to be possibly approving
Well,
this document tonight.
we'll have to consider.
Well, some of
what
these
we're
things
doing.
too, I can, if I may interrupt, like, for instance, your comment about like umbrellas, you want it to fit with the theme of Old Town rather than have them be advertisements on the umbrellas. To me, that's code, that's less policy than code. And so some of these things are suggestions we can give staff to say, hey, when you're building the code for Old Town based on this policy, we'd like to see a continuous feel. And so that, to me, that's a good example of something that you said that maybe, wouldn't apply necessarily to this document, but does apply to how we want to create, this policy document to create the life of Old Town. No?
Right.
Maybe.
I'm hearing what you're saying, and I guess I found words are just intrinsically value, and it's the granularity when appropriate. I think built or umbrellas, in that example, umbrellas that advertise for a product, either that store or a third-party store, is a policy question, and it's not a code issue.
Fair enough, okay.
From my perspective, and obviously I'm sure I have my biases, like anybody else does. I'm not sure what the.
Some of the things are already addressed in other areas, but some of them are good additions. But again, if you can email them to staff, email you know, and we haven't decided that we're going to accept this, as we have a little bit of discussion here. So we know that you as a member of the community have some comments and issues about some of the goals and policies in here. But I don't think we can address all of them tonight.
May I make a request? I'm going to ask Trish, next week we're having a special meeting. Is it possible that we have time in our agenda to finish this Old Town discussion? Would that allow Steve to be able to submit, and the you know, viewing public at home to submit changes to this document, and we would finalize it?
We could try.
Is there time in
We wouldn't have
the-
a lot of time to, because the packet for next week goes out tomorrow morning.
Right.
But we could certainly, because if you continue tonight's hearing, you have to continue it to a date and time certain. So.
So is there a time in our calendar to continue the discussion? I'm just saying, I don't even know that there is time.
Right, well, if you continued it to next week, you'd have to let us know what you wanted to have to be done by next week.
Right.
By when we come back. If you wanted new policies drafted, if you wanted, because that's a pretty short turnaround, dependent. But if you just want time to discuss it, that's not 10 o'clock at night, you know, then that would be perfect for next week. But it all depends on what you expect, what you would like to happen between now and the next meeting on this.
I think what I would expect is that this document would look relatively the same, but yet we would maybe have more comments from both Steve and maybe other people emailed out to us to be able to go through the document piece by piece to see what they're saying, to continue the discussion.
I can certainly commit to having typed comments before you all.
It would also allow us to maybe reach out to DIA and
Right.
see, or the Chamber of Commerce, and see if they want to contribute to the conversation.
So, and just because the packet goes out tomorrow, if there's public comment that comes in tomorrow, we can include that, but a staff memo responding to that public comment could be available by the meeting. I mean, I think what we
Oh,
would
you're using
hope
Flash.
for is by Tuesday, or maybe Wednesday early. So, because you need I would want to do a staff memo for all these comments, and not just kind of have you
Right.
guys
Yeah.
deliberate
Right.
on 40 comments.
I would love that, because I think from my perspective, we've been looking at this document and it's been turned over, you know, Christine went over a lot of things we've asked for and we've gotten about clarification and adding things. And so this document has grown in a way that I'm really proud of. And so it sounds like there's still some issues that I wasn't really aware of. And so being able to have that time to respond to it, if it's in our docket to do so, I think could be nice, especially with the kind of the considerations if we're not ready to make a call yet on franchises.
Because we could do, if you wanted to continue it to next
Yes.
Thursday.
I think there's a bunch of questions, and I think we need to be cognizant of some of the comments that we're receiving. So if we can do that, that would be great, and it is almost 10 o'clock, so.
The key is that next week is not in this room.
Right.
It's at the Pickering Room over by the Holiday Inn in City Hall Northwest.
Right,
So
which is
for
why
the
it's so
viewing
important
audience.
for us to be able
Right.
to receive receive the public's input through staff, so we have it ahead of next meeting also to be able to digest it.
Right.
And if it can't be answers to all of them, at least, you know, you can go through them and pick the major ones that might have actual impact or change. I mean, some of them are probably already addressed in other areas, or can't be. So if we could get those from staff, I know you're busy. It would be nice to get some comments to settle this. Okay. So with that,
I'm going to step aside and I will work on the coming days on typing something and getting that submitted.
okay, if you're going to submit any of your comments, you're going to have to do them very quickly, like tomorrow or the next day. Yes. You have to work very hard to,
I have been working very hard, but I take that under, I will seek to meet that standard.
Well, realistically, I think, there are comments that you made that are really, that you feel are really important, and those are the ones that I think we should address. So if you can at least give us that information so that we can discuss it. Otherwise, I think we were ready to make some final decisions on this, so we're giving you the opportunity.
Which is what I understood the purpose of being here was. So I will work on getting this typed up. I'm sure it probably won't be until tomorrow night.
Well, it depends on how fast you can get them in, how fast the staff can do something, so.
Understood.
We're continuing this because of you, so.
Again, I was trying to respect the public comment process, so thank you all again for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we're going to continue the
Public
hearing till the
Thursday at
21st.
And there's already a public hearing, so it would be, the time would be sometime after 6:30 PM.
Okay,
Or, because we have another one that's already scheduled for 6:30.
okay, so do your homework. And,
Can I close with 4 bullet points?
sure, quick.
All right, so I have 4 bullet points that I wanted to share with you before we close on this topic of the boundary. I believe that we should involve the southern Old Town stakeholders to get their feedback. There may be intrinsic stakeholder value that we are not considering. There is no foreseeable value or reason to removing the southern neighborhood. So removing it today may be short-sighted, not fully understanding the pros or cons of the decision. I haven't been sold on why we should, other than the fact that it looks funny on paper. I don't know if that's really a good enough reason to do something like that. I just want to close with that. Thank you for listening.
So consider it, and it'll be on the docket for next,
To be continued.
yes, to be continued, so. So,
We have to vote.
Elections?
yeah, so the last thing on the agenda is elections of chair and vice chair. Do you have any nominations?
I would like to nominate Joan to be our chair as I think, am I the second longest serving member of the Planning Policy Commission. I can say that her insight has been highly valued, and I agree a lot with her leadership decisions on how she runs this, and I would like to nominate Joan to continue to be our chair.
I would second that.
Well, I don't think, is there any other nominations? No?
If you want competition,
You have
no,
to
just
vote.
kidding.
You have to vote.
All in favor of Joan continuing to be our chair? Say huzzah, huzzah!
Thank you.
Is it too late?
I think you're all way too late to what you're doing. But we need a vice chair. And even though I think all of you would be capable, you're all awesome. Know your stuff and great ideas, and I love your, normally you could run this meeting with raise your hand. And I don't, looking at the people that are on the commission, I don't think that would work because you get into it and I've had a couple comments that said, hey, you should be more. And I don't want to do that because I think that's going to cut down on your ideas and your interest in it. But Ron has been the vice chair for a year, and he has not had the opportunity to run a meeting, and he really wants to run a meeting. And so I'd like to nominate him to continue in his position, because I know I'm going to be gone for a couple meetings this year, and he's been working hard and, kind of getting in the mold to run a meeting and be vice chair. So I would like to nominate him to stay as vice chair, if that's okay.
Second.
That's me.
Any other nominations? With that, would you vote on,
We need to huzzah.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Thank you. Aye.
thank you, and with that, I'll close the meeting at 10 something, 10:10.
9:50.
9:10. 10:10,
Someday I'll be.
whatever it is.
9:51.
9:51.